Good evening, everyone. I would like to call to order this evening's proceedings for the Arvada City Council. First thing I would like to do is have the moment of reflection and Pledge of Allegiance and call upon Councilmember Davis.
Thank you, Mayor. If everyone would please join me in a moment of quiet reflection. Thank you. Now please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Thank you. Ms. Rush, if you would do the roll call.
Mayor Simpson.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Mormon.
Here.
Councilmember Ambrose.
Here.
Councilmember Davis.
Here.
Councilmember Foray.
Here.
Councilmember Pfeiffer.
Here.
Councilmember Marriott.
Here.
Thank you so much. Now I will call for the approval of the minutes of January 8th, 2024 City Council meeting. Are there any corrections or changes? Seeing none, those will stand approved. We have no recognitions or presentations this evening, so next we will move into public comment for issues not on the scheduled agenda. First on my list, I have Darlon Cheng.
New Year's greetings, City Council members. I'm Darlon Chang, an Arvada resident living in a neighborhood that cares deeply about climate action. And I'm sure that many of my neighbors have climate-related New Year's resolutions like me. I've sent hundreds of emails to my representatives at the state and federal level urging them to take climate action this year, as well as emails to school board members in several states to apply for federal grants for electric school buses and heat pump retrofits in schools to save money on energy costs and avoid thousands of tons of carbon emissions each year. I'm a volunteer for the Jeffco Students and Parents for Climate Action, and I signed up to give my first public comment to the Jeffco School Board next month to urge them to hire a sustainability coordinator on staff, as City Council did for Arvada. My daughter met with Jeffco School Board Director Paula Reed, and Director Reed asked her to speak on her climate action concerns at board meetings, along with her classmates in her high school environmental club. Tomorrow, I'll be attending the first ever climate conference in Denver, or ClimateCon for short, like Comic-Con. I won't be dressed up as my favorite comic character, but I will be dressed up as president of a clean energy and green home retrofit company, as I was promoted this year to oversee our current projects in Arvada and Denver. My company sees my Arvada neighborhood as the inspiration and foundation for transitioning neighborhoods off of gas and fossil fuels everywhere, and I ask that this City Council support this effort by educating our Arvada residents about the transition, enacting policies that incentivize this transition, adding composting to the citywide recycling program, and providing workforce training and transition support for new clean energy workers. Decisions made this year on climate action will impact all Arvada residents for decades to come, especially my daughter's generation, as scientists have warned that further delay in reducing our fossil fuel dependence will make avoiding the worst impacts of the climate crisis impossible. According to the 2022 Arvada survey, more Arvada residents responded that the city promoting climate action is very important than other categories of affordable housing and open spaces and parks. As the president of a green home company and resident of a green neighborhood in Arvada, I believe that with policies based on resident feedback, climate action can go hand in hand with affordable housing, open spaces and parks, as well as a just transition for workers and residents away from dependence on oil and gas. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Next on our list, we have Elizabeth Walker.
Thank you very much, and thank you for all that you do. My name is Elizabeth Walker. I was born and raised here in Arvada, and I've lived here most of my adult life. My husband and I are blessed with 6 children. My concern, the thing that I'd like to bring up, is just the uptick in crime that we're seeing. We've lived in the same neighborhood for many years at 53rd and Ward Road. A lot of crime. Something that I learned as a result of our HOA meeting last week is that Arvada, the police force is down about 20 or 30 officers. So that's a big concern to me. I just would like to know more of the plan to attract and retain quality police officers. I know we have some here. Thank you so much for your service. We're really, really grateful, but we need more. So again, as a parent, I'm just very concerned about crime. Thank you.
Thank you. We will have your contact information here, and a member of our team will be getting back in touch with you. And yes, I second. Thank you, all of you, for your service with us in the city. All right, next on the list is Jim, forgive me if I say this wrong, Sillison? Sillison. All right.
Hello, thanks for letting citizens speak. Can you hear me okay? At any rate, my name is Jim Sillison. My wife, Joyce, we've lived in Arvada a really long time. Our business office building is here. I disagree with the gentleman earlier. I love coal, I love oil, and I love gas, and I think we're on the wrong track. But what I wanted to talk about tonight was not that. I am a citizen of the United States. I'm a citizen of Colorado. I'm a citizen of Arvada. My information's on the sheet. This has been an observance of mine for a long time. I've watched all government usurp, mind you, the authority of the traditional American life. Usurped authority and responsibility from individuals, from families, from communities, neighborhoods, and probably most important to me, from the church. Instead, government seems to believe that government is all-knowing, all-powerful, and uses the people's tax money to do whatever it wants. My thought on that is if you want to do something and you really feel strong about it, use your own money. Anyway, it's not working. All you got to do is look at the news. It's not working in the United States, not working in Colorado, and it's starting to not work in Arvada. I just found out we have a homeless navigator in Arvada. I never heard of a homeless navigator till a few weeks ago. Maybe I should have, but what in the world do we need a homeless navigator for? How much does it cost? How many people are there? What's the plan? So I kind of did read the plan. Anyway, I think that's going down the wrong path, continuing down the wrong path that's been well proven for the last many decades. I was thinking of how I could compare this. If I was in the mountains, and I love the mountains, I think we all probably do, and I'm in bear country and I put out a bucket of honey and sit on a log, I'm probably going to see a bear come, right? Well, that's just what's happening with this homeless, navigator and all these do-good things. They don't work, and they will come. They will come. They are coming. Are these people illegal? I don't know. Are they homeless? Are they both? I don't know. I would really like an update on all of that. What it's costing. I think it's the wrong thing to do. These people need to get a job. I think maybe if you do anything, try to help them get a job. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And a member of our city team will also be back in touch with you about some of the work we're doing around the homeless community. If you would like, a member of our city team will be following up with you regarding some of our homeless efforts. Thank you. All right, next we have Brett Forbes.
Good evening. My name is Brett Forbes, 8240 Chase Way. I'm here this evening over some very disturbing issues. The first is speeding on residential roads and brandishing weapons. The second is complacency and negligence on the part of Arvada Police Department and the City Council. My neighbor has filed numerous complaints regarding this situation, and where are we now, months later? Just waiting for shots fired is basically it. How has the Arvada Police Department responded to this? condescending comments, insinuations, laughing. I'm sorry, but that just disgusts me. Is the APD somehow clairvoyant now? Are we issuing crystal balls? Because I'd like one. I myself have a specific interest in this. I have a 15-month-old baby girl that's all over the place now, and it seems to me that this has all the makings of a tragic situation waiting to happen. In my opinion, Arvada is deep in the depths of complacency. Arvada police don't want to do their job. Chief of police doesn't want to do their job. City council doesn't want to support them. Like I said, it disgusts me. It's my position that all the responding officers that have been dealing with this, that they all need to be dismissed and not eligible for rehire. Don't get me wrong here. There's good and bad in every people group, and just the same as the police and neighbors and any other group, neighborhood, whatever you want. But like I tell my apprentices at work, if you don't like your job, get out. And if you don't want to be professional, then get out. The bottom line is, who would want to live in Arvada with its slumlord agenda, an agenda that will only add to the situation, bring people with poor character, and devalue the surrounding areas? For the meantime, until this matter gets resolved, I'm going to be down here every month. As for you, Mr. Mormon, don't bother responding to this, as your last response was nothing short of giving the people that you represent the finger. You know, I showed your response to Mr. King, and it was quite amusing to watch the change on his face. He had you up on a pedestal until then. It was a public comment, so I would assume that most of the council saw it, or should have. It basically said, go see the police. And most of you sat idly by on a condition that went on for 4 years. Make no mistake, Mr. Mormon, you do not belong here. As for the rest of you, you may scoff and pat each other on the back for a job well done, but the situation is very transparent. Do your jobs, be professional. Thank you for your time.
We have a request, council request.
Yeah, you know, I'll tell you, I'll call you out on that. Why don't you call me and why don't we go meet? Because I'll tell you one thing. We do support our police. We do listen to what they do. You're the first person that's ever approached me with any of those words. And I don't need a comment from you. You had your time. You can have mine. You call me, we can deal together. Because what you said is full of falsehoods right there. And we can iron those out.
All right. All right. Thank you. And Karen Gerbach.
My name is Karen Gerbach, and I live at 6872 Juniper Court. I speak tonight as a member of Friends of Ralston Creek Neighborhoods, which represents residents of neighborhoods Geos, Forest Springs, Westwood Mesa, and many enthusiasts of the Colorado Tap House and the Ralston Creek Trail. 2 years ago, we learned that the 14-acre former unregulated landfill capping methane and various other contaminants that sits undeveloped in the middle of all of us was to be developed into an RV storage lot. 100% of the business is outside storage. They're talking about 330 RVs, which really doesn't comply with the industrial light zoning of the property per the Land Development Code. Also, we've expressed major concerns prior to the state approving the voluntary cleanup, which just happened, and we believe that this does not relieve Arvada staff from thoroughly investigating the environmental problems of this site. There have been no recent geotechnical investigations, and therefore we request that city engineering staff seriously review the designs and determine that there's good technical data to support the designs. We cherish the Ralston Creek Trail, and we've kept tabs on the Ralston Creek at the Croak Work Zone program just west of the landfill that Arvada, Mile High Flood District, and the Army Corps of Engineers are doing to repair work that has caused damage by the 2013 floods. Arvada has a video about the 2-year project. You have it on your website. We are before City Council tonight to alert you to the complexities of this project requiring input and consideration from the City Council and City staff, as well as communities surrounding this former landfill development. And we will attend the neighborhood meeting in these chambers Wednesday night that the developer and his representatives are holding. Mr. Pfeiffer, we hope to share our concerns in more detail on this since you're our new council representative. And thank you for listening, and you'll receive an email explaining our position in more detail shortly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else in chambers this evening that would like to give public comment? Ms. Rush, is it no one on Zoom? All right, perfect. Well, then I will close the public comment portion of the agenda and move into the consent agenda. We have 4 items on the consent agenda this evening to be considered. They are R24-011, a resolution authorizing an agreement by and between the City of Arvada and A1 Chip Seal Company for 2024 resurface treatment program, project number 24-ST-02, in an amount not to exceed $3,147,254. Agenda item number 2, R24-012, a resolution authorizing an agreement by and between the City of Arvada and Instituteform Technologies LLC for the 2023 trenchless sewer main replacement project number 23-SR-02 in an amount not to exceed $1,633,898. R24-013, a resolution authorizing an agreement by and between the City of Arvada and SMH West LLC for the 2021 water main improvements, project number 21-WA-02, in an amount not to exceed $4,199,999. Finally, R24-014, a resolution authorizing a 4-month extension of 2 leases by and between the City of Arvada and the United States Postal Service for lease of the building at 5885 Allison Street for the lease of parking lot at 5886 Ammon Street. Do I have a motion? Councilmember Foray.
I'll make the motion.
All right.
All right. I move that R24-011 through R24-014 be approved.
Perfect. All votes are cast. That passes 7-0. We adopt the consent agenda. Thank you, everybody. We have no public hearings this evening, so we will move into our workshops. Ms. Gillis, our first workshop is the City Budget and Financial Resilience. Mr. Archer, is this one you? Nope.
We have a whole team here tonight. I want to begin by saying we do have a rather lengthy presentation. It's very important work, and it's grounding for the City Council strategic plan. Before I get started on introducing this topic, I do want to share that last Friday we received a timely notification from the Government Finance Officers Association that our annual comprehensive financial report for fiscal year ended December 31st, 2022 qualifies for their Certificate of Achievement for excellence in financial reporting. So it really felt good to get that on Friday, knowing that we've been working on financial resilience. And it's just another acknowledgement that we are paying attention to the right things as far as our fiscal management. So thank you for the opportunity to share this important work on financial resilience. The work is not only responsible to City Council's strategic result, it is a reflection of our financial stewardship. The work herein mitigates assumptions and guesswork. The work supports the anticipation of challenges ahead. The work provides the team and council solid footing as we move into the next strategic planning process and into the 2025-2026 budget cycle. We've been working on financial resilience for the past several months. We coined the rally cry 5x5, and that was that we would develop a 5-year resilience plan over the past 5 months, and we've got that done. Our revenue trajectory has changed. We are at the tail end of the federal funding driven by the pandemic, and we recognize that there's federal infrastructure funding available in the next few years. We want to remain informed and proactive. It would be critical and responsible to commit within our means and within what is sustainable. That is what drives financial resilience. Tonight, the team dives into services, people, positions, cost, challenges, levels of service, themes, and gaps. Our department heads, our subject matter experts, are here to present and take counsel through our work that we've done so far. Again, this information will prove foundational for the strategic planning process and discussions. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Sorry about that. Whenever we do a presentation, whenever we work with one another, we really ensure that we determine success, that we communicate, and what we want you to know, what we want you to feel, and what we want you to do. So I'm going to add to each of these sections. As far as what we want you to know, we are providing this information to take away the guesswork and the assumptions as we move forward. We want council to have the context and perspective on services we provide and what goes into the provision of those services. Our work is planned and data-driven. We also have to be flexible in adjusting to unanticipated needs and challenges, line breaks, emergencies, severe weather, crime trends, sinkholes, etc. Council's role in the budgeting process is to set policy vision, provide input and feedback on resourcing that plan to get us to where you want us to be, and then eventually council approves the budget when we're able to do that. As far as how we want you to feel, we use council discussions, the community survey, community engagement, and data in our analysis, recommendations, and decisions. As you hear from this highly competent team and gain appreciation for the level of expertise on the team, we want you to feel comfortable that we are a cohesive team, committed to the implementation of council's vision and best interests of the city. And what we want you to do, we know we're headed into the strategic planning process. We want you to ask questions before solidifying assumptions. Plan to hear more during the budget and resourcing process. You will see more explicitly the financial changes that are on our radar, whether putting numbers to the infrastructure backlog, legislative mandates, requiring additional resources. There is a lot shared herein. We have several slides to present to you tonight. No doubt this presentation will generate questions. If council is agreeable, we'll work through the presentation and take questions at the end or at a later workshop. You'll hear about the services from each of our leaders, and I couldn't be more proud of the people that I work with. And finally, you're going to hear some common themes, and I want you to pay attention as we work, not that you wouldn't, as we work through this presentation. You're going to hear about our workforce and our need to invest in them. You're going to hear about our aging infrastructure and deferred maintenance in all departments. You're going to hear about the impacts of inflation, growth impacts, and technology needs. And with that, I'm going to add a couple more. You're going to hear about affordable housing, climate variability, customer service, and the bar that we set for that customer service. And you're going to hear about unfunded critical needs that are in front of us. And with that, I'd like to hand off to Jessica Garner, our Director of Community Economic Development.
Thank you, Lori. Good evening, Council. It's always best to be first, so hopefully I can set the tone. And with this tone, I will tell you that you'll probably hear some, as Lori alluded to, some repetitive themes as we talk about some of the issues and the needs that we have within each one of our work systems. But for me, I wanted to talk with you a little bit about the Community and Economic Development work system. We're sitting at a little under $11 million for our budget for 2024. We have 41 FTEs. We have essentially 4 different divisions within the work systems. We have development review, we have building services, housing services, and economic development. We're all over the place doing a lot of different activities, and the majority of our budget that's reflected there, a lot of that goes to housing, and that's for federal funding and those pass-through dollars that we keep. If you have any questions at all about any of those divisions, please let me know. I'm happy to give you more information and more detail. We've been busy. We have a lot going on. And essentially, just some of those high-level, these are really our strategic goals that I've got listed on the other side there. And just to note, even with our first bullet point of facilitating development of 150,000 square feet of commercial real estate, In the year 2023, we had 321,425 square feet of new commercial real estate development. So we continue to not only try to meet but exceed our strategic plan goals. Retaining 99% of our existing brick and mortar businesses, we've actually shown since 2022 a net gain of 167 businesses for the existing ones that we have in the new businesses added to the existing businesses. Making sure that our permit inspections are efficient, that our over-the-counter review is as efficient as possible, and that 95% of our projects conform to the comprehensive plan, which we're also going to be talking about at the workshop on January 29th. So I wanted to briefly highlight where we feel the top 3 themes are within community and economic development. Affordable housing is one of those top themes. We have several projects that are in development right now. They're working through the pipeline. We have ongoing interest to develop affordable and workforce housing units throughout the city. We're working with as many partners as we can, including the state agency, the Department of Local Affairs, as they continue to develop funding opportunities and explore methods to incentivize affordable housing development in the future. We're there with them. We will continue to pursue those viable partnerships, land bank, site acquisition, anything that we can do to help address this need. The second theme is the current high level of development activity. We're very busy right now. We continue to see activity throughout the city in terms of commercial, residential, industrial development. We are managing that, so trying to make sure that with our permit review, the development review process in general, that we're doing the best we can. And even though there was a slight decrease in 2023, we foresee that growth or that high level of activity continuing on for the next few years. I'll put a caveat there, for the next few years. And then I think we're going to see some changes in development activities in the city. The third theme that we have is really addressing limited economic development resources. Especially as we've come out of the pandemic, there were a lot of our businesses that were really struggling to recover from that. Addressing financial resiliency, recruiting and retaining quality staff. They struggle with that just like we do. So we continue to work with our AIDA board to provide grant resources, funding, content expertise, anything that we can do to assist with that. And we anticipate that need will continue to grow over time. So in terms of gaps, I know I was only supposed to have 3. I added one more because it was so big. This is a gap that we find an opportunity, but when we talk about slowing growth, what we really anticipate is that over time, that greenfield development activity that Arvada has had historically is running out. We're running into places that are going to require redevelopment, infill, basically retrofitting things to meet what folks would like to bring into the community, and that really requires our staff to be nimble, to be educated on those ideas, and also to really coordinate closely with our different partners throughout the city. That includes utilities, public works, stormwater, so that we understand what the impacts are and that we can translate and pass that information on to our developers so that we can provide that consistent platform for them to make decisions. The next thing that we anticipate as a gap is the increased need for affordable and workforce housing. We have to continue to engage and develop partnerships, secure grants, find funding in order to preserve affordable housing and set aside viable areas for development. We need to work to engage with a more diverse population with needs and challenges that require translation, interpretation, heightened accessibility, and global representation. We need to really expand our role so that we are bringing traditionally underserved populations to the table as we work on this and try to address this need. The third is business attraction, so kind of hand in hand with limited economic development resources. We want to continue to bring in great and viable businesses. We want to support the existing businesses that are here. And as we try to attract businesses, and we have limited land resources and challenges that come with finding viable places, it's a gap. So that's an opportunity for us to learn, to anticipate, and to make sure that we communicate that effectively to our developers. The last one is technology, and I think you'll hear this from a number of our different departments throughout the city. We're at a point right now where some of our software systems, I'll use an example, I'm sure you've heard it, Track It, is really starting to become obsolete, and it is expensive, it is tricky, and it needs to work every single day for everybody that needs to use it. And we're finding that it's increasingly harder for it to work the way that we need it to. So I'll be back. You'll see me at budget time. I'll be talking to you about that need and how we can address that. But that is the one thing, and we've heard it in the community survey, we heard it even with our staff, that if we could address some of the gaps that we have with resources, with our technology, it will help our customers to have a better experience. Did I mention that 2024 is our year of the customer? That's really what we're hoping to focus on. So our big takeaways are that we continue to need to meet the diverse needs of the community. We need to engage in order to ensure sustainable, safe, attainable, and innovative development throughout the city. We need to engage our employers and our business folks in order to understand and adapt to the changing economic conditions. We need to provide increased learning and more efficient services to our community, and this really comes down to good customer service, whether it comes to permit inspections, development review, grant funding, community engagement. We need to continue to do better and to learn our audience. And as societal conditions change, expectations and demands require increased patience, flexibility, and education. And that's really on the part of our staff as well as with the community. We're all going into very new territory when we start to look at some of the challenging conditions ahead. So it requires a lot, and we want to rise to the occasion. All right, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jacqueline and Sharon. Thank you very much for your time tonight.
Mayor, is this a workshop? We can ask questions?
They
waiting to the
requested we
end?
save them for
Okay.
the end.
I can't remember that long, but sure, I'll try.
You want to write them down?
Well, good evening. I'm here to talk a little bit about public works, and then we'll move into the utilities portion of our infrastructure work system. So shown here is really the purpose of our department. We look to provide and maintain our network of roadway, traffic, pedestrian, utilities, and facilities infrastructure so everyone can get to where they need to go safely and comfortably. Shown here are some of the resources required to do that. Ultimately, resilient infrastructure, as I see it, is the foundation for Arvada's vibrant community, and it's about being safe and accessible. So this next slide presents a few metrics of the services that we perform. And you've already heard from CED some of the challenges we face with a changing environment with growth, with the need for affordable housing, with a customer service focus. There's continuity with the work that we do here with Public Works as well. So in addition to providing services like supporting development review, we're really tasked with coordinating our infrastructure master plans to make sure that the systems that we're building and we're maintaining meet the needs of the future. Consistent to what you likely hear from your constituents and to what we've heard in the 2023 customer survey, maintaining streets and traffic operations are consistently valued as one of the most important services we provide as the city. Similarly, in the last year, we also saw the lowest satisfaction ratings with how we are providing those services. So this is an opportunity for us. And I'll note that transportation, traffic, and roads and infrastructure was ranked as the #1 issue in the last year's customer service survey facing Arvada in 2023. So some themes. I'm going to lead with our people first culture. And again, this is a common theme you're going to hear through a number of the departments. We require a resilient workforce. I show an example here of our snow team. Arvada's snow team won the 2023 Team of the Year award. And it's a great example of how we collaborate across multiple departments to provide these services. It takes a robust team to provide snow removal and ice control services across the city, and we wanted to show this picture of our over 150 hardworking team members from streets, water operations, wastewater, water treatment, parks, traffic facilities, and fleet. It's not you're not unaware of some of the challenges we face with the competitive market, licensing requirements, making sure that we're meeting both the demands of the current workforce and what the next generation workforce are going to expect. But we're working hard to make sure that we're providing the training, the upskilling needed, that we're providing a balanced workload and the proper equipment to do their job safely. Aging infrastructure is another one that we wanted to highlight for public works and infrastructure as a whole. This is both the seen conditions, like our pavement condition that you likely hear often about, but the unseen conditions underneath the roadway network. So I showed a picture here of some sinkholes and some failing storm sewer infrastructure that we have to maintain. And then, of course, inflation. Showed some examples here of a local engineering news record cost indices that we track. And while this just reflects the last 5 years, you can see that really the post-pandemic era, things changed from our 1% to 3% inflation that we're typically planning for. And our teams are constantly monitoring and tracking and adjusting our delivery of our capital projects to make sure we can deliver the scope and the services we committed to while planning for some of these needs. So gaps. One of the largest financial gaps that we're forecasting as a department is related to our pavement management and street maintenance programs. Our level of service commitment, our goal here is to improve our pavement quality index, and you'll see that over 70% of our network is currently failing in regards to that goal. Also in this graphic shows our bridge conditions across our network, and that's something we're also putting in place preventative maintenance programs and plans for. Some other elements I wanted to highlight, our building fund and our facilities maintenance. Similar to the pavement quality index, we track our facilities condition index, and we set goals there for how we monitor and maintain our city buildings. Our average year is 40 years old, and the replacement value is over $250 million for our city facilities. So again, you're going to be seeing more and hearing more from me and the team related to how we want to address and maintain the condition of our city facilities. And then, of course, more broadly, our traffic and transportation needs. So all of this is connected. We're doing a lot of work that's underway right now in regards to our transportation system plan. And again, the feedback we're receiving through the public engagement as part of that plan is consistent with what you heard in the customer survey and with what you're hearing from your constituents. We have some reinvestment to do in these systems as well. So we're working to address these as a coordinated team. And through the budget process, you'll hear more. But at this point, I just presented half of our infrastructure work system needs, and I'd like to hand it off to Sharon Israel to discuss more information about the work system, and she'll wrap it up with the infrastructure takeaways.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Thank you, Jacqueline. I'm Sharon Israel. I'm the Director of Utilities for the city, and I want to restate something you just heard Jacqueline say. That is, that infrastructure is the foundation of Arvada's vibrant community, so we appreciate your time tonight to let us talk about it. For the Utilities Department, our 2024 funding is just short of $170 million. I want to point out that is not all revenue. We are still spending down we're spending down portions of our $100 million bond issue from December 2022 for water and sewer projects. So this does include a combination of the bond and also the rate and fee revenue. We have just over 109 FTE in the department, and we provide services citywide. We provide safe and reliable drinking water to the community, wastewater and stormwater collection operations. We're responsible for the city's waste hauling services, the city fleet management, and then all the billing and frontline customer services for the Arvada community related to utility bills. We also do some internal services. In addition to fleet, we manage the city mailroom. We work closely with the finance department on enterprise fund revenue forecasting and rate setting. There are 4 enterprise funds in the utilities department. Revenue is about $80 million forecast this year. And little known fact, we also manage armory services within utilities to support our police department. Next slide. Oh, never mind, I got it. There we go. All right. So we're organized into 6 divisions. Again, we've got citywide services, 24/7, 365. We cover all 40 square miles of the city. In general, from the community survey, customers are really satisfied with our services, and especially they all mention water, the importance of water, and then also that they consistently value clean, reliable water as one of the most important services provided by the city, and we take that very seriously. As part of our 5x5 exercise, we also did 3 themes, 3 gaps, and then I worked with Jacqueline together on the infrastructure takeaways. So I'm going to start with the themes. Many of you may recall me talking about these themes in previous presentations over the last several years. These themes came up as part of our master planning work that was directed by the City Council to prepare master plans for our water, sewer, and stormwater infrastructure. And we continue to be challenged by a combination of both aging infrastructure. At the same time, the city's plan development is moving forward. So I want to talk about each of these themes. Under aging infrastructure, there's a couple of photos of some pipes that we've replaced in the last year. We've got a number of our pipes, and especially these air vac valves that were placed in the 1960s, and we're chipping away at replacing those. But those are just a portion of the overall city needs. We manage over $1 billion of infrastructure if you look at replacement value on all the utility systems. So at the same time, we've got a lot of backlog related to aging infrastructure. We also have development pressures. So you just have to look around the city and see the infill and the new development, especially on the west side, and that is putting pressure on our ability to provide reliable water, sewer, and stormwater service. That photo on the lower right is actually a photo of a tank that we had to build, specifically because we are growing on the west side. And that work will need to continue. We've got several more projects, including water treatment capacity and new storage tanks here in the next 5 years. Of course, affordability is part of this as well. We've asked council over the last few years as part of a financial strategy to raise revenue through rates and fees and system development charges, and as I mentioned, bonds, so that we can pay for this massive reinvestment of infrastructure at the same time we need new capacity. So affordability is very much on our minds. Every year when we talk about the budget and we propose to City Council a rate or fee adjustment, we're always looking to see where we fall with the other communities in the area. We're looking to just compare and make sure that we're not totally out of line with where other water and utility providers are. And then we also look at national benchmarks. And I committed to you last year that we'd be doing more of that in 2024, and we are doing that. So there are some national benchmark standards that we can compare our rates and fees to and provide you that information as part of your policy decisions. You're going to see, I think, this thread through a number of our presentations tonight, and that's, in general, just our resource requirements. So one of our gaps continues to be resources to support level of service. I wanted to start with people. We've got amazing, dedicated team. You just have to look at how they responded to last week's Arctic freeze. Over the holiday weekend, we responded to over 50 calls for service just over those few days, helping folks with frozen water meters, frozen service lines, and then some minor issues of our own with the weather-related impacts. We hire folks, and we need certified water operators for these jobs. And as the city expands, we literally need more people to cover that additional square miles. We also need things like equipment. That truck there, it's a $500,000 piece of equipment. It's a jet vac that we use to clean and maintain our sewer and stormwater lines. So again, as the city grows, there's more of a demand for that. And then as I've talked with council before over the last few years, and you'll continue to see in this budget, the need for capital investment as well. Another gap I wanted to highlight tonight, that picture in the center is what a water line looks like when somebody hits it with a boring drill. And what that means is that somebody who was operating a drill to install, most often, a fiber conduit, pushes their drill underground and generally tries pretty hard to not hit stuff. What we're seeing is a significant increase over the last few years of people who are operating those hitting our stuff. So our current backlog or outstanding payments due to us from insurance claims is over $250,000. Some of those claims are almost 2 years old. So we really are looking at our staffing, at our inspection team, working with a code enforcement team to try and prevent this from happening, and then have policies in place so that if it does happen, especially if we've got repeat offenders, that we do have the tools so that doesn't happen. What happened in this case with a water line break is it was a service interruption for the folks in that area. It's also a mess, it's dangerous, difficult to clean up, and it takes us away from our other duties. So we are looking at that. In 2023, we created a position that was a damage prevention foreman on our water operations team. He's helping us significantly by improving some processes here, but sadly, without enforcement tools and resources, I do think this will continue to happen. And then the third gap, which I would say is more of an opportunity, working with the finance team on what we're calling cost allocation, which ensures that as we're putting costs on the 4 enterprise funds, that there's a clear line of sight in terms of those expenses, and so we make sure that when we're setting our rates and fees, that we're really clear and transparent about cost allocation. So I'm going to present the takeaways for the infrastructure work system on behalf of myself and Jacqueline. Again, this is looking in the next 5 years. So for us, when we thought about financial resiliency in the context of infrastructure, it really meant being able to afford those resources, the people, the equipment, the supplies, the capital reinvestment and investment, so we can support level of service for our community. Our folks really value having reliable services, and as Jacqueline mentioned, we're not meeting the desired targets for things like pavement condition index. Each year, a lot of our water system is getting older and we're not catching up, but thanks to the council support over the last couple of years, we're making a lot of progress on that. But we need to continue to push in that in the next 5 years. Another theme here is inflation. Not only have we seen high inflation in the last few years for consumer indices, but even higher for capital and construction indices. So that is out of our control. We are tracking it, we're trying to manage through it, but it puts us in a difficult situation. And then interest rates I mentioned also because it's likely we will be proposing additional bond issue. As we talked about in 2022 when we did it, and we will be impacted by interest rates as well. So overall, we believe that when it comes to infrastructure, we have to be courageous. There's a certain courage it requires to continue to advance these tough decisions. It's hard. There is a backlog. We're working hard on it. We've got the right team on it. But we will continue, including in the budget year ahead, to be asking to raise additional revenue so we can continue to tackle that backlog and continue to provide reliable service for our new residents as well. So for the infrastructure work system, that looks like rates and fees, system development charges, probably some bond debt, without which we just won't be able to provide the level of service that the community is asking us to. I do want to mention, and I think it's been brought up a couple times by other speakers already, that doesn't mean we're not looking at grants, federal support. We have a project right now, Q1 of 2024, where the utilities team is working really closely to see what we're eligible for and be able to bring in as much of those types of funds as we can to support our projects. So thank you again. Love to talk about this stuff, but I think it's Chief Ed Brady's turn. He's going to talk with you about the police department. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. More for our guests behind me than you, but I'm Ed Brady, Chief of Police with the Arvada Police Department. Thank you for having us this evening. The Arvada Police Department is comprised of 253 employees, 190 sworn officers, and 63 professional staff with a budget of just over $48 million. We operate out of a sector policing model, so we operate out of 4 different locations. Police headquarters here at City Hall, our Lake Arbor Community Station, Whisper Creek Community Station, and of course our Westwoods Community Station. We implemented this strategy about 10 years ago to really patrol the natural neighborhoods that exist within our community so that we could really go from a macro level of policing down to a micro level of policing so that we could better provide better community policing in our neighborhoods. Our sworn staff is the staff that you see mostly in uniform that go out and protect our streets every day. They're our first responders to calls for service, our detectives that investigate serious felony crimes, crimes against people, crimes against property, against children, and of course narcotics crimes. Our investigators in our crime lab that respond to crime scenes to investigate those. Our school resource officers that protect our schools and mentor our students in those schools. Our traffic officers that protect the streets, and our sworn staff and administration that help keep the police department running. You may have read in the City Council Friday memo about some enhanced benefits for our sworn staff. This is really an effort to really retain employees because of all the great work that they do every day given our staffing shortages. Our next area is our neighborhood services team, which is comprised of our animal management and our code enforcement officers. And then lastly, our professional staff in operations, which consists of our records employees that manage our police records and core requests, our evidence technicians that manage over 71,000 pieces of evidence, our police service technicians who you see when you walk in the lobby of a police department or may speak to when you have a call for service. And then our crime analysts who do a lot of our looking at crime and data and also administrative reports for the police department. Our top 3 themes, as you've heard me talk about before, are recruiting and retention. The last couple of years have been difficult for the police department, not just Arvada Police Department, but law enforcement in general. But it's been especially difficult here with the loss of our 2 officers and our 2 friends, Gordon and Dylan. And that has had an impact on our staffing, and we're still recovering from that. As you also know, it takes over a year to get an officer recruited, hired, and fully functioning on their own out on patrol. My officers behind me and the rest of my staff have heard me say that recruiting is our #1 priority in the police department, because without a full staff, we can't perform as well as I'd like. I think we provide exceptional service, but I look forward to the day when we have a full staff and can do even better. We've done several things over the past year, which include lowering our degree requirement for lateral employees, referral bonuses, geofencing so we can expand our reach for social media. And this year we've added an additional recruiter to our recruiting unit, and we're looking at a recruitment and a marketing consultant to help us broaden our reach to get more officers on the street. And again, I mentioned the retention efforts. We certainly value and want to recognize our hardworking officers that are out there protecting our streets every day. Our second theme is service delivery. As I just mentioned, as we are short, we're looking at alternatives and trying to be creative in how we deliver services. And so we have had a process open for civilian accident investigators, and we've used vacant positions to help fund these. Unfortunately, we have one applicant that is qualified and is moving on to the next step, but we had to basically wash the rest of the list, so we'll be reopening it to get more accident investigators. We moved a sworn position from our neighborhood services and made that a civilian professional staff manager in there. And we're also beta testing having PSTs basically be able to take reports out in the community that would normally require a sworn officer to respond. So we are trying different things. But one of our criteria for that is that it will be able to immediately impact us today so that it will help allow officers to respond to emergency calls for service so that we can address some of our other needs in a different manner. And then the other theme is our homelessness. As you know, this is a significant call driver for the city, but for the police department too. We respond to camps. We offer resources to those in that community. We work with the businesses to try to manage these relationships, and we deal with complaints on a regular basis. We have 2 core officers. I would love to have 4, as we have had in the past, but these officers provide a lot of those services. And we have co-responders that assist our core unit. But again, they're not first responders, and so usually they're accompanied by our core officers when working with this community. Our top 3 gaps, again, service delivery. We have 32 vacancies, and we are looking for creative ways to address that. But I'd like to break that down a little further. So it's not just 32 vacancies, it's -5 in our traffic unit. We have 3 less school resource officers than we would like. We have 2 less core officers, 16 less patrol officers than we need, and 6 less investigators than we need. And so again, we are looking for creative ways to address this. Our evidence storage, as I mentioned earlier, we have 71,000 items of evidence that we try to manage. And they do a good job, but they need a better facility to do it. We've been in discussion with this for probably 8 years, beginning with City Manager Devon, and we're getting close to a solution. But it has taken some time, and we are in dire need of that. And then lastly, our leadership succession and experience. 74% of our officers have less than 7 years. We also have a young leadership team. And so my top 2 priorities were recruiting and retention, and my second was leadership development, so that we can continue to mentor and train our new officers. Our key takeaways include 2 of the things that I just spoke about, service delivery and evidence building. But I should also mention the budget shortfalls in the state and the county that are going to impact Arvada. I believe the county is facing a 12% reduction in the coming year, and those costs of some of those services are being passed down to the city of Arvada. As you see up there, Jeffcom, J-Crackle, Jack, basically anything that starts with a J is going to increase fees in the coming year, and that is going to be passed down to the police department in the city of Arvada. Our future needs, one is just the growth of the city. We have 125,000 in population, and we're continuing to grow. See it every day as you drive on Wadsworth or 58th Avenue. Right now, we are at about 1.52 officers per 1,000 citizens. That's just one metric that you can measure the number of officers that are needed. Other agencies are up to 1.8, 1.9. While that's not the only metric, it does indicate that we are lower on that scale. And right now, I don't know that we'll come back and ask for more officers next year until we can get more positions filled. But at some point, when we get closer to full staffing, we'll be coming back to council asking for a significant number of officers just to try to get us up to the level of service that this city deserves. The evidence building, as I mentioned, we're getting close to a solution, but that is not cheap either. We are always looking to advance our technology so that we can better provide service and protect this community. And those services are expensive. One of those is Flock, which helps us detect motor vehicle thefts more quickly. We're looking to hire consultants for recruiting and marketing so we can expand our marketing reach to get more officers in the department. And one last area that I mentioned is that the federal government and the state government are looking at legislation that could impact our seizure money that we collect. As you know, seizures can be taken from criminal organizations, and we've used that money in the past. We've used that money to pay for a command van of about $750,000. We've used that money for body armor and trauma kits. And we've used that money to pay for software that impacts internet child predators. And so we've used that money to protect this community. And if that money is impacted by taking it away from criminal organizations, that will essentially be an unfunded mandate by the city, for the city, because those needs that we have will not go away and will need to be paid for in another way. With that, look forward to answering questions at the end of the presentation, and now I'd like to hand it over to Judge Catherine Kurtz.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm excited to come talk about some of the great work that we've done in the municipal court and some of our 5x5 financial resilience planning. I think we have the smallest budget within the city departments at $1.5 million. We have 13 FTEs. We are also one of the 2 smallest departments in the city. One of our primary goals is to effectuate community safety by balancing the needs of the community with the needs of the defendants who appear in our court. And so that's my role as a judge, is to constantly balance community safety needs with making sure that our defendants have the services and resources to become better humans. And we support the safe community objectives to make sure that Arvada is a safe place to work, live, play, and visit. So moving forward in terms of some of the themes that we've seen for the, well, let me take a step back and talk about some of our service delivery. These are some of our 2023 numbers. We had about 5,700 cases total come into our court docket. We had both juvenile and adult violations. Our specialty court docket is the One Small Step Court. We currently have 57 active participants. We have about 85 to 90, depending on the day, other defendants who are currently on warrant status, meaning that they are part of our court system, but they fail to appear, and we're just waiting for them to come back in. We have a probation department that supervises both juvenile and adult defendants who need additional assistance and supervision. In line with our strategic results, they do pre-sentence investigation reports on every single juvenile who enters a plea. So there were 234 pre-sentence reports conducted. What this means is that they're conducting risk assessments to make sure that sentencing for juveniles is based on risks and needs rather than just on the offense committed. So we're doing a much better job tailoring appropriate sentencing for our juveniles and making sure that we're diverting juveniles who don't belong in the criminal justice system out of it as efficiently as possible. We did have 42 defendants overall sentenced to probation, and those were supervised by our probation officers. And then I have an amazing court team who have court clerks, deputy court clerks, and my court administrator who run the operational part of our court process. So having said that, now I'll talk about the top themes for our court. We have been working for the past several years on our paperless court project. Essentially, what it means at the most basic is, as you can see in the picture above, we are a paper file-based court system. So every single case that comes before our court has a paper file. It is incredibly inefficient. I think my staff spends at least 10 hours a week just looking for files, which is maddening. And we are in the process of utilizing our current case management technology to convert to a paperless court system, which will provide incredible efficiencies moving forward and, frankly, just bring us in line with other municipal courts throughout the metro area, which are all paperless at this time. We have really struggled with our current case management system to transition over to the paperless function, and I'll talk more about that when we talk about gaps. One of our other top themes is staff retention. When I started in 2021, we had a fairly high turnover rate, and over the past year, we have been managing to retain our incredible workforce, which I'm super proud of. We have an amazing team, and we've really lowered that loss rate of great staff members. So we're doing everything that we can to train, to properly supervise, and to support our team, and that's something that's a big focus of our court management team. And then finally, we are really looking to ever increase our support in the One Small Step Court and our probation services. Our One Small Step program has grown immensely since we restarted it in September of 2021. We've implemented a phase structure, which really gives clear guidelines and expectations for our defendants in terms of what their expectations are, and what it's a level of accountability, if you will, but it also gives them guidance in what they need to do. And as our name entails, the steps are small. Some of our basic steps in phase 1 are get an identifying document, show up to court, meet with our homeless navigator, meet with our housing navigator. But while the steps are small, we are still providing a sense of accountability and responsibility to the community, and working with community partners, including our business community and nonprofits and governmental organizations, to make sure that, again, we're balancing the needs of the community, of our business community, with the needs of our defendants, to give them the support and resources they need to get to a better place in life. And we're doing the same type of process within our probation services. I'll stop pressing the buttons, I'm sorry. In terms of the gaps, one of the big gaps that we identified over the past year that was a struggle for us to move the paperless court project forward was the need for additional court management staffing. I have tasked our court administrator with working full-time on that paperless court project, and that necessitated the need to hire a second deputy court administrator so we could push the court administrator's duties down in a more efficient manner so that she had the ability to focus on the paperless court project. And just to give an explanation behind that, it really does take that court administrator, her full-time work, to implement the technology needed to transition our current case software into a paperless case software. But we're still looking at court management staffing gaps that I think that if we were to improve the staffing resources, I think we do a lot better in our general overall data keeping, statistics keeping, reporting out, working with community partners, and do a better job reporting out to council as well. And so that's something that we're going to be analyzing. The position that we currently have was approved for 2 years, and so we're going to be analyzing the utility of that and how we can best use that for the next couple years. Our goal is to develop a more strong workforce plan so that we can make sure that everyone's being fully utilized, both in all of our departments and probation, within our court clerks and our court management team. And then finally, and most importantly, as you've heard my other counterparts talk about, we're really looking at the technology. For us, it's the long-term efficacy of our full court software. Is this really the best system for our case management system? A lot of other municipal courts that we are talking with throughout the state are moving away from full court. And it's because they're sensing the same frustrations that we're having, that it's just, it's not the best customer service, and we're really struggling with the gaps that we're finding there that is causing us to really struggle with moving into a paperless court system. So that's something that we're working on, we're analyzing, we're looking forward to the future in terms of, do we need to switch up, do we need to look at other technology to better support our system? So, some takeaways. Again, the paperless court project's our biggest project. It's our biggest focus for 2024, and we're really pouring in all of our resources to move that forward. We're looking at the long-term efficacy of full court, and we are working on continuing to improve our service delivery always with our current work staff. As you've heard, a theme from, again, my other counterparts is, if we were to stay at the same rate of our budget income, would we be able to maintain the current service levels? And I don't think so. And so I anticipate, again, coming up to the budget process in the spring and summer, we are looking at how do we maintain the same service levels and service delivery levels that we currently have, while not asking for big increases in our budget requests. Which is part of why we're looking at that workforce planning to streamline and make our processes as efficient as possible. Thank you. And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Janes, who will be talking about vibrant community and neighborhoods.
All right, good evening, Mayor and members of council. My name is Anessa Janes. I'm the director of the Vibrant Community and Neighborhoods Work System. So the purpose of the Vibrant Community and Neighborhoods Work System is to enhance quality of life and community health through people, parks, and programs. So in a nutshell, our work is hyper-focused on health, vibrancy, and beautification of our community. So looking at the Arvada Community Survey data, leading up to our last survey in October of 2023, Arvadans consistently rate the quality and the quantity of our parks, trails, and open spaces very favorably. As growth in Arvada begins to slow, we've heard a bit about this from our CED director, we're responsible for taking a strategic approach to maintaining and conserving what our residents value, as well as ensuring access to high-quality park and recreation facilities for all Arvadans. So this slide outlines some key details about the service delivery of our work system. One of the foundational key performance metrics for municipal parks and recreation agencies is acres of parkland per 1,000 residents. Another measures proximity to parks and open space, so you may be familiar with the 10-minute walk score that many parks agencies are scored by. And lastly, a common performance metric used to gauge the efficiency of service delivery for parks maintenance agencies is FTEs per 10,000 residents. So 96% of Arvada residents live within a 10-minute walk of a park. This is exemplary. The city of Arvada also boasts a whopping 51 acres of parkland per 1,000 residents. So really the key takeaway from this slide here is that the city of Arvada provides a very high level of service to our community members in terms of access and in terms of efficiency. In addition to these KPIs, the Arvada Community Survey found that 97% of Arvada residents say that their local parks, their open spaces and trails are important to their quality of life, with 77% of our residents saying that this is very important to their quality of life. These high ratings are spread evenly among all demographic bands in Arvada. Additionally, high satisfaction with our maintenance and the quality of our amenities are spread evenly among all demographic bands as well. This is something that all Arvadans agree on. All right, so looking through the lens of 5-year financial resilience, these items here on the slide are the 3 key themes identified for the VCN work system. The first is the impacts of changing demographics. The majority of Arvada residents interact with our city's park system on at least a weekly basis. Arvada residents are well tuned in to their hyperlocal needs of their neighborhoods. This includes improved connectivity needs, safety, access to green space, and recreational amenities. As Arvada's demographics shift, the services that we provide must also strategically shift so that we can continue to meet the needs of our community over time. Through grants, the budget process, and strategic planning, VCN continues to put forward proactive investment strategies that will position Arvada well to attract residents and businesses. This is going to be important for our economic future. Addressing deferred maintenance. So while our parks and recreation system is extensive, the infrastructure and assets that support it are aging. Again, here's a theme that you've already heard a lot about tonight. As our assets age, they require more frequent and costly inspections, replacements, and repairs. And the current funding related to maintenance is insufficient to keep pace with needs. This means maintenance is delayed. So the takeaway here is that the work system's deferred maintenance needs are increasing. And through financial resiliency planning, we're looking at ways to move beyond a reactive approach to maintenance toward a more sustainable and strategic funding model. So the last theme here is evolving maintenance best practices. So the latest figures from NASA and the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration show that 2023 was the hottest year ever recorded on planet Earth. This is according to temperature data going back to 1850. This data underscores a larger and more important warming trend for the planet. The last 8 years were the hottest ever recorded on planet Earth, and forecasters expect that the next 5 ahead of us will be the hottest years on record. But what does this mean for Arvada? Well, the impacts of a changing climate are already being felt by our community on an ever-increasing frequency and scale. We're talking about extreme heat days, issues related to water scarcity and drought. These challenges require a new way of thinking in order to preserve our quality of life. We're developing strategies to ensure the long-term resilience of the assets Arvadans love and value. Specifically, regional best practices for landscape maintenance are different now than they were even a decade ago. This is human adaptation in real time. In this area, we're focused on taking a data-driven approach and engaging with our residents as we explore resilience-focused modifications to our maintenance standards. Okay, again, keeping 5-year financial resilience in mind, these are the top 3 gaps identified for the VCN work system. So impacts of a changing climate. So this is a picture from a tree limb drop-off that we provided for residents following an unseasonably late and record-breaking snowstorm in May of 2022. This storm caused significant damage to our city's tree canopy and to our parks, and it was the most damage we've experienced in one event in over 15 years. So as a state and as a city, we're headed toward even more unpredictable climate of extremes here. We anticipate increased challenges related to water scarcity, extreme heat, damaging storms, wildfire, emerging pests, and disease vectors. Successful adaptation and resilience building depends on investment, as well as changes to how we manage our natural resources. Strategies to respond to these conditions, for example, large-scale debris removal for residents following severe storms, field turf conversion, park-scale green infrastructure projects, for instance, these strategies are not yet built into our current level of service. The second one here, you see volunteer coordination. A number of our services and programs run on volunteer labor. These dedicated volunteers provide critical expertise and labor to support the work that our community values. The volunteer landscape has really changed since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. And currently, our work system is not adequately resourced to sustain, retain, or support or expand the volunteer-based programs that the city provides. And lastly, sustainable funding for aging infrastructure. So the City of Arvada maintains a complex portfolio of assets, including things like historic structures, ball fields, pools, synthetic turf, golf course bunkers, tennis courts, trails, and playgrounds. Much like a home, recreational facilities will always need ongoing care and maintenance. VCN has large preventative and recurring maintenance needs resulting from aging infrastructure and also heavy use. These maintenance needs currently exceed the funding model under which Fund 14 operates. This is a financial resilience concern because when you defer maintenance, it simply means you're putting it off, not that it goes away or that it doesn't need to happen. So in reality, deferring maintenance typically leads to greater maintenance costs down the road. So as the city approaches build-out, available resources to fund capital repairs will decrease further, and we need creative solutions to close the deferred maintenance gap. All right, this is my last slide, the key takeaways. So residents are satisfied and well-served by Arvada's systems of parks, trails, open spaces, and recreational assets. Our community survey consistently shows that access to quality open space and trails is a key driver of quality of life for all Arvadans. Arvada's reputation as a community with a very high park level of service did not happen by accident, however. A history of proactive investment made this possible, and we're looking to continue that tradition. Inflation, you've heard this earlier in this presentation, it's impacted the cost of doing nearly everything. So from labor, construction, maintenance materials, et cetera. It's making deferred maintenance even more difficult to address. In order to preserve and protect the community assets that Arvada residents value, the city needs to test and implement new approaches to doing things. Our environment is changing, and we need to prepare and adapt with resilience in mind. From parks maintenance, park retrofits, green infrastructure projects, bold adaptations will be necessary in order to maintain, preserve, and protect our community assets. Engaging with and educating our community members must be an essential part of this work. And lastly, demographic change will have an impact on demand for city services, sales tax revenue, and the voice of the customer. So moving forward, our work system will remain focused on making data-driven recommendations with equity, the community perspective, and long-term vision in mind. Thank you for your time. I'm going to pass it over to Rachel, okay, our city attorney. Thank you.
All right, I am first up for the Organizational and Service Effectiveness Work Group, which includes all of our internal service providers. So I am doing the presentation for the City Attorney's Office. As you know, my name is Rachel Morris, I'm the City Attorney. And the City Attorney's Office provides all of the legal services and advice to all of our internal employees, boards, councils, commissions, all of that. We also provide risk management services for the city. So in terms of how we deliver our services and what services we offer, under our legal division, we provide general legal advice and counsel. We provide drafting services. We create transactional documents, legislative documents. We redo codes. We represent the city in court, both with civil litigation for claims filed against us and claims we prosecute, but also for criminal cases that we prosecute in municipal court. We do have administrative functions on both our legal services side and our risk and safety services side. And then on the risk side, we provide risk and insurance services. We maintain our insurance portfolio, make sure that we're appropriately insured. We manage claims, and that includes property, liability, workers' comp, and we also lead our safety program. So our top 3 themes, when we were going through and thinking about what's coming up in the next 5 years, one of the things that keeps coming up for us is the lack of control over, and it says legal's work plan, but really this is for risk and legal both. When we're trying to plan out and forecast what we're going to do 5 years down the road, one of the biggest challenges for us is some of the variables that we just can't control. So the biggest one for us, for both risk and legal, is claims and litigation. We do not know what claims people are going to assert. We do not know what litigation is going to be filed. And so we just have to be ready to cover that and to make sure that the city's interests are accounted for and represented. We also work very closely with all of our internal departments, and we need to be ready, we need to be flexible, we need to be ready to roll when they're ready to move forward with their projects, because our support on those projects is critical as well. And sometimes that involves a certain amount of uncertainty over volume of work and things like that. In terms of the other technology and operational efficiency, we are always looking for ways in our service-heavy department to make our processes and procedures as absolutely efficient as we possibly can. We want to be watching for bottlenecks in terms of the services that we provide so that we can make sure that we're providing service at a pace that is acceptable and helps promote the city accomplishing all of its other goals. And we're always on the lookout for technology that helps create those efficiencies as well. One of the last top 3 theme for us is additional claims and litigation cost increases. So the more claims we receive, the more litigation is filed, the more those costs increase. In terms of our top 3 gaps, we really are trying to look at addressing backlog of work. As we try to maintain that pace of work to help support the city achieving its goals, there are always things that we would like to be doing, but that aren't urgent at the time, that we'd like to go ahead and get back to if we can. There's been capacity challenges and things like that that have prevented us from doing all the projects that we would like to do. One of those big things that we would like to move faster on is code revisions. That's one of the things that doesn't always get to the front of the page. We do them and we regularly bring them to you, but sometimes those have to be on the back burner. Our response to social, economic, and political changes as a city often involves the city attorney's office and risk being involved in assessing new challenges that the city is facing. So, for instance, the city attorney's office is impacted by increasing legislation that adversely affects municipal governments. And that includes legislation which increases our liability on claims or for certain services that we offer, but also things that require additional increased costs for the city and may increase risk of other things. Increased claims and litigation is another one of those things. When people are in a period of economic and political upheaval, you see typically an increase in costs in claims and litigation, which we are now, and so that impacts us as well and creates gaps in our work. So prevention activities are, and maybe underfunded is the wrong word, maybe I should have used a different one, but as we have looked at our safety as a city over the past year or two, trying to make our safety programs more robust, everyone at the city has really started to dream big about what we can do, what we're capable of, what we should be doing, and I love it. And I think it's amazing, and I think it's a great direction for us to be headed. But along with that comes the question of, when we have these big dreams related to safety, related to how we might become even better than we are right now, how do we fund some of those projects? How do we fund the additional training and resources, remediation, things like that that we want to do that may not have been on the horizon last year? So all of these things in some form or fashion are going to end up translating into our budget presentations later. You'll end up seeing requests for funding that addresses these things. So our key takeaways are, first and foremost, our people. We want to make sure that we're able to maintain high-quality legal and risk management services, but that requires investment. It requires investment in our people. It requires investment in tools to make us more efficient over the next 5 years. We also, as we had mentioned before about the prevention-related things, we want to reduce claims litigation and increase safety, and we need to invest more in some of those prevention measures that can help us get there, particularly with safety. And last, as we had mentioned at the beginning, related to themes, our workload continues to be somewhat unpredictable related to claims and litigation, so we've just got to be ready for that. We do, as you all know, you've seen the data that I collect. I look very, very closely at the claims we get, at the cases that are filed. We keep very close track of all of that. And so as we track that, it gives us some heads up about what we're going to see, but we're never going to be able to predict it with 100% certainty. So it's just something to keep in mind as we move forward, that we're not able to fully predict that. So. All right, so Linda Haley with City Manager's Office is next.
Hi, good evening, City Council. I'm Linda Haley, Deputy City Manager for the City Manager's Office, and I'm going to give you a brief overview of what we do in the City Manager's Office. You all have a great understanding of it, but we do so much. We have 26 employees in the City Manager's Office, $5.6 million budget. As you know, we provide the overall strategic and operational direction for the organization on behalf of the community and in support of your council policy directives. Several of the services that we provide are related to community outreach, emergency management, homelessness, neighborhood services, city administration, communications, including the Arvada report, as well as follow-up on resident issues and concerns. These are the programs that we have in the City Manager's Office that support service delivery. As you can see, there are several different and wide and varied programs that we have in the City Manager's Office, and not to forget a lot of special projects that we ensure we prioritize and take on, such as DEI, the legislative agenda, homelessness, as you've heard throughout the evening, our CRM tool, that's our customer relations management tool, which is Ask Arvada, and employee recognition. So our top 3 themes that we've recognized through this process obviously is financial resilience. You've heard so much this evening already, and you still have a few more departments to go through, but the themes that you're hearing with financial resilience is all about the fact that in order to maintain current service levels that we have, we need to ensure that the revenues coming in can support and sustain our current service levels. We're finding that that's not the case. It's costing more and more just to maintain the current service levels that we have, which is why we're here tonight and why this presentation is so important to inform you of those costs. And you've heard a lot of those examples this evening. We also find it really important that we're managing the influences and impacts and opportunities of federal, state, and regional initiatives. Our city attorney and others have also talked about how legislation can impact local government, sometimes negatively. We've heard of those unfunded mandates, good intended legislation, but we find that the impacts tend to be a lot more costly than we ever imagined, which again creates a burden for us. And of course, providing organization-wide vision and leadership and direction, that continues to evolve and change. We want to ensure that as a fairly new city council, we're listening to what your priorities are, but we also have a new workforce. We have a new leadership team by all accounts, and so providing that organizational vision as we're ever evolving is important for us as well. Our top 3 gaps include customer service. We've mentioned the CRM tool, Ask Arvada. We do see opportunities for enhanced service levels there, and we will be coming back to discuss that during the budget process on how can we possibly replace this tool or enhance it at least. We want to have a better strategy for managing customer service as it relates to our incoming phone calls. We also see a gap in sustainable funding sources for various program needs. Homelessness is a big one. You're all aware of that. Our print shop, for example, is another one we're monitoring and we'll be talking to you about in our budget process. Dr. Janes had talked about the volunteer program. DEI for us, it's an important priority, but we don't have a lot of designated funding or capacity to really support that long term. So those things are on our radar that we consider gaps that we will be coming to you to talk more about. And of course, a regional homelessness strategy. This is so important for us, and we look forward to discussing this further for more clarity. So our takeaways in the city manager's office, again, enhancing customer service levels, strategizing sustainable funding sources, and anticipating and planning for external impacts as we look at our own strategy. Thank you, and I'll pass it over to Gabriella Baumer with Human Resources.
Thank you, Linda. Good evening, Council, Mayor. I'm Gabriella Baumer, Director of Human Resources, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we do. We are a small but mighty team of 13. We tie with Judge Kurtz with the smallest department in the city and almost the smallest budget. We have just over $3 million for this year. I do want to point out that about $1 million of that is internal service fund transfers and some one-time funds that were granted for some very big projects we're working on in 2024. So our budget usually is about $2 million. HR exists to support the city as an employer, and more so to ensure the city is an employer of choice in the Colorado Front Range. We develop strategy and policy to ensure compliance with all of the state and federal laws, employment laws that apply to us, and we create and support programs and services that position the city to attract, develop, and retain a high-performing workforce so that they can provide superior services to our community today and into the future. Let's see if I can organize myself to paper and slides at the same time. There we go. These are the services we provide and support, or the programs that we structure ourselves under. Our programs and services are structured to support the city's administration and record keeping for employment records, strategy and policy to make sure we are that employer of choice and fulfilling all those mandates. And we support the full life cycle of an employee from recruitment to retirement. Some of our highlights for 2023 are on the right side of the slide there, and you can see that we nearly support nearly 1,000 employees. We have conducted 189 recruitments in 2023, updated multiple policies and procedures and our personnel rules to comply with new laws. And we introduced a new leave program this year called Extended Care Leave, and we've met most or all of our performance measures. We've met or exceeded them. So we're really proud about that. Our themes, so like Jessica, I cheated a little and added a fourth one on here, so I apologize for that. But our themes are, as you've heard, very recurring through most of our work systems. Recruitment and retention is a high priority for us. As you've heard many of our presenters today, it is a top priority for all of our work systems, especially for those hard-to-fill positions and those vacancies that we've had for a long period of time. In this very challenging employment market, it's important to continue to innovate ways to recruit and retain our employee workforce. One tool we have to do that is ensuring that we have innovative and competitive total rewards that our current and future workforce will find meaningful and valuable enough to want to choose to work for Arvada and stay with Arvada. This goes beyond your traditional pay and benefits structure. It includes additional categories such as flexible work environments and resources for employee well-being, including things like childcare and affordable workforce housing. You heard that come up in a couple of work systems. It's applicable to our employees as well. I'm going to say about 47% of our employees live in Arvada and serve the community, but that number is decreasing over time as affordable housing becomes less and less attainable. And it's important for us to start thinking about ways we can support our own workforce in being able to secure housing that is near the community so that they can live in the community they serve. Employee and leadership development is important to ensure a strong people-first culture and succession planning for knowledge transfer and continuous service. Upskilling employees helps to retain them and deliver on community needs for the future. So these are very important themes for HR to support as well. And technology is our fourth theme that I just want to reinforce that we are working on making sure our technology is upgraded. We're transitioning from Oracle to Workday and improving our operational efficiency. Our top 3 gaps center around our team's capacity. We are a small team, and this is specifically related to employment legislation. Over the past few years, specifically state legislation has increased in complexity and volume, and it's putting a big strain on our team to be able to research and interpret these new laws, develop policy, implement policy, train our employees, train our supervisors to comply, and really just administer all of the records and tracking involved with the policies and the laws. And so this is really taxing our small workforce to be able to add all of this additional administrative work to our programs and still maintain our existing service levels. Ensuring we are staffed to support our technology is also another gap. We feel we have a good plan to support the design and implementation and deployment of our new system, but the needs for change management and process improvement and training our users on using the system will continue to be needs for a few more years to come. And lastly, resources and staffing overall. We need to get more innovative. We need to do more outreach and marketing to retain and attract our workforce as the employment conditions continue to grow increasingly challenging. We want to do more things like build apprenticeship programs. We want to outreach with community colleges, do more national recruiting and things that can really innovate and bring more numbers to our recruitment sources, but we need to be able to resource those activities and also address gaps in our increasing need for leave management, compensation, compliance and equity, and things like e-learning and upskilling of our employees so they can meet the changes of work in the future. As their jobs change and evolve, we want to be able to upskill them to meet those new skills that are needed. So key takeaways for the human resources team, as we are primarily we serve people, we are service-oriented, we are people serving people. It's important to point out that we do have a strong team, a team of skilled, engaged, and motivated professionals who are experts in their fields, and most importantly, we are dedicated to delivering the superior service to our workforce so that they can deliver that same service to our community. Continuing to develop and retain our team to stay up to date with these emerging laws and changes in the future of work is going to be critical and a high priority for us. In the next budget process, or even maybe not this year, but in the next 5 years, you'll be hearing us ask for additional resources and staffing in order to support the transition from our legacy systems to our new systems, really supporting our workforce and our team to use those systems efficiently. We will be looking to help with change management and process improvement and user training of the new technology. And then, of course, those increasingly complex and unfunded employment mandates need to be done. They are not nice to do's, they're have to do's. And in order for us to maintain our current service levels, we need more resources to do the have to do's so we can still do all the great other work that we do. And lastly, those innovative recruitment and marketing and apprenticeship programs, the development and retention of our diverse workforce, supportive programs like DEI, and increasingly demanding employment conditions, being able to retain our employees and give them those meaningful rewards they're looking for is going to continue to be a need for us to staff and resource so we can provide optimal services in those areas. All right, that is my presentation. I'm going to turn it over to Brian Archer, Director of Finance.
Thank you, Gabriella. Thank you, Mayor and Council. As she stated, I'm Brian Archer, Finance Director. As you can see, Finance is by far the best funded department in the entire city. A little over $43 million, 31 employees, but actually over $37 million of that is transfers, debt payments, grants, and other citywide items that don't fit in any other department. So actually the Finance Department itself is about a $4.8 million operation with 31 employees. We provide all things financial so that the rest of the organization can do all the wonderful things you've just heard about. These are some of the services that, and the areas that we use to provide those services. So you can see revenue, which is our sales tax, financial and economic strategies, which is really our budget and analytics, payments, which you would think AP and payroll, specialized accounting, which is really investments, banking, fixed assets, our financial analysis, which is actually our external audit and our grants program, and then purchasing. These themes should look very familiar. Gabriella laid many of these out, as we are all support services. So we're looking at improving our technology, both internally and externally. You heard a lot about the ERP, and that is kind of our sole focus. It's been our focus for the last 6 months, will be our focus for the next year and a half. We're looking at growing our staff through the ERP and developing them. And then ultimately, what will we look like in 5 to 10 years? What will AI do? Will we dive into digital currency? What is our tax base going to look like? Are we going to continue to tax only goods, or are we going to start taxing services? I did miss something on the technology side. We're also looking externally. As council knows, we're active members in the sales and use tax stuff from the state of Colorado and trying to make the ability to file and pay taxes easier. We will continue to be an active participant in that. Some of our larger gaps fall again around the ERP. Really, we feel like we're funded very well in implementing the ERP. We are worried about the future training. This is a large implementation. For you that have been around a while, the last time we did this was 25 years ago. And so this is going to take a long time to train, as Gabriella said, over 1,000 people. We are worried about what the staffing will look like once we're done. We're going to change a lot of items and move forward with best business practices. This is going to affect our procurement, certainly going to affect how we do budget, possibly will affect how we do grant reporting and how we go after grants. And then from our perspective, our department is quite young. Like the chief said, he has many employees that are under 7 years. We have changed 28 positions in the last 18 months in the finance department. As I said earlier, we only have 31. And so you know that we've changed people a lot. We've moved a lot of people internally, so they've had opportunities. They've advanced and taken on different challenges, but we've had to backfill them. Key takeaways, we've already covered these: ERP, ERP, ERP. Cross-training, certainly trying to get expertise and depth throughout the organization. And then talk a little bit about grants. We've heard a lot that there's going to be available money out there. We want to maximize that as an organization. And so we will be looking at hiring staff so that we can both go after grants, get them, and then report on them. That is my presentation. I'd like to turn it over to Craig Pulley, CIO.
Hang in there, I'm last. I think I can wrap this up in about 45 minutes. Just kidding.
Very much appreciated, Mr. Pulley.
So IT's mission is to improve city performance and productivity through technology. We span every city department, and we help each department provide all of the services that they deliver to residents. Our total budget is about $15.7 million. About half of that is in the replacement fund. We have 45 employees. I won't read all the bullets here, but they illustrate the size, scope, and complexity of the services that we provide. We have a diverse portfolio of services ranging from foundational cybersecurity to enterprise application, individual computers and software, networks, et cetera, for every employee and every work system. At a high level, we utilize the one-team model to partner with every department to make sure that they have the tools that they need to function. The top 3 themes is, first, the city is increasingly adopting new technologies and modernizing legacy systems. This is the digital equivalent of aging infrastructure. We're not immune from all of the challenges related to aging infrastructure you've already heard about tonight. We've had success with things like replacing the website platform, and we're currently working on replacing Oracle. We're also partnering with departments like courts to determine the efficacy of full court and CED to look at the future of Track-It. With the growing reliance on digital systems, cybersecurity is also a top priority. We must remain vigilant against expanding cyber threats, investing in advanced security measures, training, and incident response plans. Compliance with data privacy requirements is also a key consideration for us. Our evolving technical landscape requires a workforce with updated skills, and we need to continue to invest in training and upskilling programs for IT personnel to keep up with this change. Top 3 gaps. Cybersecurity and data privacy is also listed as a gap because the reality is no matter how much focus we give to it, we are always playing catch up. The attackers and attack methods change fast, and you're always trying to chase a moving goalpost. Next, the teams that are within IT are at or over capacity. It's clear that our ability to deliver new work is going to be strained by a lack of project management and technical resources over the next few years. This limitation applies to nearly all program groups because of the specialized nature of the various project requests across the city. Finally, natural disasters and cyber incidents can disrupt or halt government operations. We need to continue to develop and invest in robust disaster recovery and business continuity plans to ensure essential services continue during these disruptions. There are many opportunities for us to strengthen this area in the city, and these are both physical and digital considerations. Key takeaways. The good. We have really reshaped the IT function within the city over the past couple of years, and we have some great momentum right now, including having Arvada named as a top 50 technology team across the nation. But predicting the future in technology is a challenge. We are keeping a close eye on both AI and quantum computing, particularly how it's being used by bad actors. The impact from this could be dramatic. Demands for new technology across the city continue to increase, and as our portfolio of digital products continues to grow and become more integrated and complex, we are actively working to upskill in new areas to better meet the new demands. And now I believe I kick it back over to Lori.
Thanks, Craig, and thanks to the team, and thank you for council. You've all been really engaged. I was going to do a test, like on a scale of 1 to 10, how engaged are you still? Give me a 10. Just, okay. We're
Guys,
almost
Lori
done.
needs this one. Hold your hands up.
This is for the team. Anyway, tonight we've shared themes and gaps. We can't lose sight of all the good work that continues. We really have talented and committed employees that are doing a lot of good work. As reflected in the community survey, our community is with us. Yes, we have work to do, but they're behind us. So it was great to get that engagement from our community, and it gave us some things to take a look at. What we've shared with you tonight is just to make sure you're fully aware of what's ahead and on our radar. As we have strategic conversations and new ideas are brought to the table, we have to consider sustainability of current services or changes in or trades in the service levels that we provide. So what is next? So we're here tonight, and we'll also talk about our fiscal policy, budget and fiscal policy here shortly. We will have your City Council Strategic Planning Retreat on the 9th of February. We've been reviewing that. I'm very confident in how we're going to walk through the work with you. We will bring you a revenue requirements analysis, and then we'll head into that budget development cycle. So this is foundational. I believe you have some questions tonight. We can go through questions tonight. We can schedule another workshop. Really look to you for your direction in that area.
Council, do you want to ask questions this evening, or would you like to hold and process your thoughts a little bit longer? Okay, I've heard a vote for process over here to my left. Councilmember Marriott, you were first.
I have questions.
Okay.
I'm going to start with Judge, and I don't mean to be picking on you, but I want to throw a couple things out for you to think about.
Sure.
As we get towards our planning retreat, kind of a couple of concepts, and I want you just to think about and be prepared to maybe answer these in a little more depth, and then I've got a general comment. So one of the things you mentioned in your presentation was that courts now are needing to balance community safety versus defendants' needs. So as we go forward, I'd like you to get a little more in depth on that. I mean, I understand that just as a concept. However, you know, when I look at the Arvada Municipal Court, we see fewer cases than we did at times in the past. Our community safety is different than it used to be, but not because of issues within the municipal court. The crimes that we see in our community these days are not typically prosecuted in municipal court. So I don't know that, I guess I'd just like to have a bigger discussion with you about this concept of using the court to try to balance defendants' needs, when, to me, municipal court ought to be about swiftly, fairly dealing with people's cases that come before the municipal court. And one of the goals there might ought to be efficiency. And so rather than helping a defendant, it might ought to be efficiently dealing with cases. The other one I heard was that, you know, handing out juvenile sentences based, again, on risk and need versus the crime committed. And again, I understand what that means, but I guess I would like a little more in depth about why that's necessarily beneficial to us. Certainly can understand that for a juvenile who may get something different than they would normally get. But when you look at the city of Arvada, the citizens of Arvada, that, you know, is that really what our court system is for? Or are there other layers of government that we participate in that really have that responsibility of filling in the gaps that parents don't do or whatnot? And then last one for you would be you mentioned, you know, a need is an increase in the one small step in probation services. You know, it wasn't that long ago we didn't have probation services at all. And I understand the difficulty with dealing with, you know, potentially better outcomes by having probation services, but everything comes with a cost, and, you know, we need to make sure that this is really worth it. The other thing is this one small step court. I understand that it's a difficult population to deal with and very difficult to motivate them to do the things that might make them less of a burden on our community, but just last week I had to pick an employee up from jail, and I got to tell you, 10 days in jail was quite motivating to an employee to ever do that again. And I suspect for a lot of those people it would be too. And I hope we're not just falling into a situation where we're taking on the responsibility of an individual's positive outcomes versus dealing with their case in court appropriately the way we should be. So anyway, I just want you to think about those three things kind of as questions or themes as we get through your presentation, as we talk about how the city goes on. And then lastly, I just want to make a general comment about this. This was an excellent workshop. I think it's very, very good background and laying the foundation for what are going to be difficult decisions by City Council. The consistent theme through every department was more resources, however. I believe all of them had we need more resources. And a little bit puzzled in some ways because one of the giant benefits of technology over the last 20, 30, 40 years is productivity. We do more with less than we ever used to. Certainly I know with my phone in my pocket I can do things that 30 years ago I couldn't do, and it makes me more effective and I can accomplish more in a shorter amount of time. Because we're a city government, our only option for more resources is to go to the voters and ask for it. And I would say that's a very unsure proposition at best. And so I hope as we're laying these foundations and talking about, you know, the need for more resources in every work system we have, that we're also giving kind of some equal time and effort to, in the event, what I would consider likely that voters say no to more financial resources, that we're thinking about how do we continue to provide the services that actually touch our citizens without more resources, because that's a very not only possible outcome, but I would say likely outcome in a environment where we do ask voters for more resources. So that's more just a broad comment. I don't need really an answer to that. You certainly can if you want, but otherwise, I think this was very good as far as, you know, giving us kind of an idea of where we stand and what we face.
And I certainly agree with you, Councilmember Marriott, as far as there were themes about additional resources. The work goes into much more detail than what we presented tonight, because part of what we did also was trade-offs. And what does it mean as far as maintaining service levels? What's needed and where can there be trade-offs? So we absolutely are doing that work, and I respect your comment.
Thank you. Councilmember Pfeiffer, you are next.
I have a lot. Does somebody have a few? And I'll let them go first.
All right.
I'll
All right, then
else go.
I'll
Yeah.
let Councilmember Davis take the lead.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councilmember Pfeiffer. I appreciate that. I just have a couple of questions. In the theme of workforce, thank you, staff. This was amazing, because I've watched this from afar via TV or Channel 8, and so I really do appreciate all the work that you've put into this. And as Jacqueline and Sharon know, I am an infrastructure girl, so in terms of workforce, for VCN, what does employment recruitment and retention look like? Those are definitely jobs that we can't do via our phones and our computers, and we really need to make sure that we keep those features viable, beautiful, and amenable to everyone who comes to Arvada. We see people coming to Ralston Central Park, and that's exciting. So thank you, and I do realize that manning those jobs also in infrastructure and public works are very important. And then I had a little note here that said, where does emergency management live? And I found out that it lives in the city manager's office, and so I was curious about how that works with the incident command structure and that type of thing. You're probably going to go into that at the retreat, so that's basically, and then just one more. What does DEI look like as it pertains to employees? In my mind, it's exempt and non-exempt field work and office work kind of things. I've found that sometimes office workers don't get the same level of safety training as some of our field staff do. So it's just, that's my idea of DEI. So thank you so much for everything.
Thank you. Councilmember Ambrose.
Well, I just have very few specific questions. Thank you, Mayor. Ms. Rhodes, for your slide on Public Works, one of the percentages was how many curbs are percentage deficient for ADA, but there wasn't a number there. Is there supposed to be a number?
Yes, we're monitoring and tracking that number, updating it annually. In our 2019 ADA transition plan, we had identified over 10,000 curb ramps across the city that were deficient at that time. Steadily, through our pavement management program, where streets require maintenance and overlay, we go in and proactively, ahead of that work, bring those deficient curb ramps up into compliance. So, looking at my notes here to see what we did in 2023, I'd have to get back to you on the specific numbers, but overall we're making a lot of progress through the available resources for our streets maintenance programs. But that is something that we continue to track and report on.
Okay, thank you. And then for Mrs. Israel, I was wondering, you mentioned in your presentation, where are you? Okay, there you are. That you said that you needed better enforcement tools for developers and other folks who keep on striking our infrastructure and causing problems. Do you mean you need, like, city council to create policies to fine people who create such infrastructure problems?
We're looking at what kind of additional tools we would like to bring forward. That is a combination of policy, processes, working with the municipal courts, working with code enforcement. Just in general, giving us the support that we need to implement new tools to prevent this from happening.
Okay.
Yeah,
I was
thank you.
just wondering if you were requesting like a policy from us as one of those tools.
Not yet, but we'd like to talk more about it.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then this might be for Dr. James or Mr. Archer. There's a fund from the state that has about $4 million a year for turf replacement. Our grants, are we going for that? Have we gone for that? Have we gotten money for that?
Thank you for the question. The answer is yes. We are applying for that funding in this year to expand our turf replacement program. For 2024, however, we've used money from the Sustainability Division's already budgeted program to support 40 additional turf replacements for our residents. So we're going to see kind of what is the demand for that type of service, and we'll add that data into our application for the state funding when we apply this year.
Okay. Thank you. And then I have another question for you, Dr. James. You mentioned that we're going to need creative solutions in order to be able to come up with funds for deferred maintenance in parks. Are there certain creative solutions that apply to parks only, like concerts that show to generate revenue or other things like that?
Yeah, so similar to what my colleague Sharon just said, we have a lot of ideas that we'd love to explore with City Council in the coming years, and get your feedback and get feedback from the community as well as we look for new ways to generate revenue, new programs that could support us there.
Okay, thank you. I'd also like to just say to Chief Brady, thank you very much for your presentation, and I would like more information about how much money you would think you put into like preventative crime services versus like crime enforcement services, because I really appreciate like the caseworkers and the core team and the crew responders that seem to be more on the preventative side of things to prevent things from escalating into a crime. And so I really appreciate Arvada Police Department leading in that, and I would love to see, like, if it's available, more analysis about what kind of support you're anticipating for that type of public safety. Okay, yeah, so that's more general. I didn't have anything too specific on that. And then there are a few slides that are not legible. Maybe if I was like 20 years old, they would be, but I could not see them. So utilities, top 3 gaps, utilities, top 3 themes, and public works, top 3 gaps. If I could see those charts like in the whole thing as a whole page for my old eyes, I would really appreciate that. So I don't know if that's from a director or from Kristen to be able to see those slides in particular. I'll email you, Lori, which slides I can't see.
Okay. No, we're here to help you. And the whole presentation, you can't see them on your screen. Is that the challenge?
Yeah, because I can't like expand it, and then when I do, the text is really small, so I'm like, what street is a failure? Like I can't see that.
We'll get it to you.
Okay. Yeah, and I also really appreciate the court system, coordinating public services to avoid recidivism. It looks like that you are really following the social studies that show how if you marry enforcement with public services, you prevent recidivism and people from coming back to the court again, which costs the city a lot of money. So I appreciate the direction that you all are going in for that, trying to create some systemic changes rather than just like what's off our gut or, some cases sometimes. And I also appreciate this entire presentation and assume that you all are going to be asking for money that shows that the investment in the public good now will help citizens save money. Like if we get our streets done, then I'm not going to spend as much money fixing my car because I'm running over potholes, right? So I assume that is the kind of financial risk calculus you're approaching with all of the services that the city provides, and I appreciate that.
All right, Councilmember Pfeiffer, take it away.
All right, so I have comments, questions, humor, and everything else mixed in. So we're just going to kick through. And
Councilmember Pfeiffer,
feedback on grammar.
Do we want to call the break before you go or after?
No, we're powering through because I want to get out of here. So the courts, it's interesting to hear Councilmember Ambrose and Marriott kind of, the spectrum there. But I do believe there's a balance between the two because when you think about, when you hear the businesses and you hear what's happening for theft or people running in and just grabbing something and they don't even get held accountable for those little personal thefts of that business, and our small businesses can't sustain. And I start getting worried that if we do not have some sort of repercussions for your actions in society, there is no, there's no respect, there's nothing happening there, and our businesses will leave. And being a bedroom community, I think we need to be very sensitive around the needs of some of our businesses while still maintaining the character and the respect of our citizens. For economic development, so Jessica, I would encourage that we really kind of think about workforce housing in a different lens, in a different way, because sometimes when we talk about attainable housing or affordable housing and workforce housing, and a lot of these themes are like, yeah, it's a me too. Like, hey, I'm a me too city, and me too, I do this. We've got to really push the envelope and look for really innovative ways to address it. I don't want to prescribe that here, but I think you need to find attainable outcomes that show that it was delivered on, like a true thermometer on that. And how do you prove that either workforce housing or affordable housing has been achieved? Other than, 8 people got housed. Well, what does that really mean? It doesn't stop there. Find innovative solutions with partners and nonprofits and businesses, and try to find ways. I'm going to go ahead and say something on my day job, but when CDOT has partnered with cities and built housing for the workforce, it's happening in every city on the Western Slope, and we've got to find new ways of looking at things. And I really am excited that CDOT's thought of those things, and working with Frisco, Fair Play, Steamboat, all of these, and finding housing for employees that can't afford housing to live within or even close to the community they work in. So when you talk about workforce housing, I'm really going to push on you to think innovatively of what that means, and how do I know that we are making a difference in that area. And like I said, even for our own staff. I mean, there is staff that can't afford to live within an hour of here, and yet we are going to add to the congestion of our community by telling somebody to drive an hour to come to a work and lose what little money they have because they can't afford a house in the community they either live, serve, or live close to. So I'll take that to heart. As far as, so like I said, there's going to be comments in here. Let me see, catch all that. I'll come back to those. Utilities. So Sharon, for utilities enforcement, that always perks my ear, because one of the big offenders is obviously fiber, and I know that for a fact. It's also one of the only things unregulated that goes into the underground utilities arena. I would strongly encourage our staff to consider getting with CML and look for regulations that empower better enforcement, as well as an annual fee for access to our right-of-way. I think it's unfair that regulated entities who do a good job with our sub-utilities, but yet an unregulated utility like fiber optics gets away with anything they want, and they don't care about the disruption and ruining our neighborhoods. In fact, that picture you showed, there was fiber parallel to that line, but apparently fiber was going perpendicular to that line, which again just shows the spaghetti they create, which puts a burden on our citizens. And knowing that the expense around sub-utility engineering is gone through the roof with the new legislation around that. So I would think we should probably advocate for legislation that cities should be able to collect an annual fee to maintain the sub-utilities, the environment. From the police department, obviously you've heard this from Chief Brady, that leveraging non-sworn for crashes and certain crimes, awesome. I'm a big fan of that. I've always been behind you. I think I saw Lakewood has one now. I saw him on the highway doing an accident, which was the first time I saw Lakewood doing it. So it's a good thing that I think we're in the tip of the spear, and we're gonna one up it. We're gonna one up it. I agree with. I was going to call you Congressman. Excuse me. Sorry. I was going to promote you. Okay. See, there's humor mixed in here. Councilmember Ambrose, as well, the comments around the police. The other thing I wanted to bring up with the police department, and I know you want to wait until you hit your staffing levels and then move up, because I think that there's always going to be a vacancy, and there's always a number of vacancy, 10%, 50%. There always will be. I would encourage a further conversation around what is a better number, because you're always going to have vacancy no matter what. And I think you and I have had some conversation around that before. But if the number, because of our population at 1.25, it's always remarkable the high quality of our community for the low officer count per capita. We just, while the iron is hot, you need to strike on it and get the number you need. And we know you're not going to be at the nice number, but if the number is 225 or 250 of the sworn, let's put that number there and start working towards that. It's going to take you years to get there, so we already know that path and that journey. That would be some feedback. Here's my humor for Anessa. I'm sorry, I might do traffic incident management since he has jobs. I'm not going to plow anymore or do the mowing. I don't think I'm going to mow lawns anymore for parks. I was thinking of that as my retirement job, but I do want to be a park ranger too. So I don't know. Maybe I could do half part-time. That's when I retire. Finance. They're the best. I think I found the money. They're the best funded, they said. So I think if we all need money, we're going to go ahead and go after his budget. I do think that FTE grant, do we have an FTE for grants? Like 100%, we have 2 of them? And are they focused on all the departments? Or are they specialized in a certain area? Because the grants are so complex, I don't.
So we have one that's in finance that's focused throughout the organization. We have another one that's in housing, that specializes in housing, but also supports.
Okay.
Yeah.
And does, like PD, does police department have a grants writer? I know they go for grants a lot.
They don't have a specific grants writer, but they have.
But they go through you?
No,
Oh.
they do write their own,
Oh.
and they have some team members that do it. Ed, do you want to add to that?
Bridget Roberts is our business analyst, and she applies for and manages grants.
Okay. So does departments have specialists like that in different groups? No? Okay.
Councilmember Pfeiffer, may I just follow up quickly on
Yeah.
this? Real quick, do our grant writers also handle grant reporting requirements, or is that handled separately?
Oh, that's a good question.
Thank you for queuing this up.
The answer is both. We have a grants accountant in finance who helps support, but also in Ed's example, and Bridget does a lot of that work, and some of the other departments do a lot of their own work as well.
Okay, thank you very much.
And that's a heavy lift too. That's a good point, Mayor, because just the reporting alone could be years on end of constantly following up, which impacts. So far, no questions. That's good. IT, yeah, you know, working for an organization that got attacked by ransomware. I think I understand the importance of protecting it, and especially in light of just the environment. I don't need to say it publicly, but it's just a lot of people want to attack infrastructure. So, you know, if I was to sum up everything that I heard tonight, really something that Councilmember Marriott said I kind of relate to is really balancing how technology or software automation with FTE requests, and then, you know, what can we get rid of? At the end of the day, it's a tough thing. I'm going through it now. What can we not do anymore? I mean, there's always those pet projects, and there's always those things that creep up and they come out of somewhere. But if they're not tied into the strategic plan or the golden thread, then we shouldn't be doing it. We don't have the resources. We don't have the time. We also need to really consider when you balance the FTE ask. I know we contract out a lot. We really need to start talking about cost avoidance or cost savings by going with an FTE. There is something about institutional knowledge. There's something about having that person here. Consultants and contractors come and go, and sometimes you lose that institutional knowledge. So it would be interesting to find out, like, the thought process within the staff that we are consistently looking at those balances, and is it something that software can take over? Is it something that maybe we don't need to do or it can automate? Or is it something that, because of the shift in our environment, should employees that once turn the widget do something else, if that makes sense? Good thing is, like, electric vehicles. Mechanics are really afraid of electric vehicles because that's a different technology completely, but they're willing to adapt to become more like electrical technicians than old mechanics with oil and gas. So it's not that their jobs are getting rid of, it's just we're looking at it differently. So let's make sure that we're looking at resources, because I heard some interesting things that made me question that a little bit. So, you know, I wrote down FTEs versus process improvement. If there's a way to look for that process improvement, I know you're all looking at it, but let's really dive into it. And if you don't understand it, because I hear a little theme of, well, FTEs, if we get FTEs, we can maybe solve this, but that's not always the case. I find out it's always I find like that one person that's doing something that everyone's wondering, why is that person doing it? Is that the red stapler issue kind of thing going on? And we just need to kind of make sure that those pockets are not there. Not saying they are, but I found them in state work. You know, you mentioned tonight the lot of needs and funding priorities. There's a lot of competing needs of our core services. That's a challenge for us. It makes maybe some of us drink up here, but we've got to figure out how to balance them. And I'm probably guilty over the decade that I've added to the chaos that you're all trying to muddy through with competing priorities. But I've always appreciated when Mr. Marriott always says that we should first, let's make sure we focus on our core business. So the theme is, you know, for me is to continue to improve, find best practices, or even better, you know, ask yourself, why can't we do this? Sometimes some people say, well, I just do it because I've always done it that way. No, but why can't we do it different? Why can't you? Is something preventing you? Is it policy? Is it procedures? Is it money? Get all that out there. You know, as some people, when you talk about and we deliver, as my boss would say, being a 27-year ranger, he would say, we need to reduce the flash to bang. I guess the police will love that one. We've got to reduce that flash to bang. And maybe that's some areas we can do within the team to try to see those improvements. Because I feel like once we hit all those process issues and delivering faster and getting this, the FTE asks me not be as big as we might want it, but we've got to make sure our house is clean first and that we are doing the best we can. I'm not saying we're not, but I look to all of you to dig deep for that. So if I was to narrow this down for a retreat, a strategic retreat, I would name it down to 4 things. So I went from 3 to 4 because all of you did. Homeless and customer service is my number 2 and customer service is interesting because you all said it, and I've always wondered about it because I remember when I first came here, it was always happening in here. It's crazy activity. You get the vibe. Going here now, it's like closed doors and it's just quiet. But it's customer service to not only the public, but I see customer service as safety. How well does our police department and how do they have the tools to do what they need to do? I also see that, and I see this theme as well, employee development. The more we invest in employee development, the better our customer service is. So I see that as the number 2. Number 3 is obviously infrastructure. And because Craig kind of linked it to infrastructure, I guess technology is actually 3 if I put you in that category. But that's running with the big dogs, you know, the streets guys, or the utilities. But infrastructure, we got to continue. We will never get ahead of it. It's been, I don't know how many years we've been talking about infrastructure, but I mean, streets alone, I don't think we're hitting I don't know what it is now. Is it 16, 18, $20 million we need to maintain our streets every year just to stay up on it? What is the number now? 20. Okay, so when we started this adventure it was 16, so now we're at 20. So we need to continue to invest, and we're at 13, a little less than 13, 12 point something. So we're slowly, roughly getting there. And the technology. I know we use acronyms, ERP and CRM. We should avoid that for our public so they know what that means. But basically how we interact with our customers and how we operate our business at the end of the day. For those that don't know what those are, both of them, especially the ERP, is a huge lift for any organization, any business. And we just need to just pull the Band-Aid off and get it done. I know we're methodical. We're going to go through change management with it. But the longer we prolong it, the harder it is for us to divorce, and sometimes you just got to rip the Band-Aid off. So I think I didn't have any questions. Oh, the last thing is PowerPoint, a few things. No acronyms, and a little bit more information on those acronyms, because sometimes you just say ERP, and then you're like, what is it? So if somebody was to read this PowerPoint outside, they probably wouldn't understand. So a little bit more data under those bullet points would be nice. Since you did it, I thought I'd throw that in. And that is... I know. Yeah, I agree with you. I was using my bifocals. That's what old people wear. Yeah. So I think that's all I have. It's not really questions. It's more comments on it all. And I appreciate this is really good. The last thing I would say is this almost feels like this should be our plan. In some way or another, and then have actual actions behind it, because these are things that have to get done. I know we'll talk a little bit more, but I almost feel like this could be our plan. Is just go back to basics, get it done, and then we can work on the nice other things later. And that's all she wrote.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Pfeiffer. Both Councilmember Mormon and Councilmember Foray have been able to gather their thoughts. So, Mayor Pro Tem and Mormon, you were first.
Thank you, Mayor. I will try to be quick and short here, but I will echo some of the comments that Councilmember Pfeiffer made about priorities. I agree with those, and I think to our infrastructure team, we hear you. We've got those major gaps that we need to fill and figure out, and so I'm willing to work hard with you to do that. And our echo to our police. We have, as a council in my tenure here, have worked very hard to hear your requests and try to be as responsive as we can. And that goal of getting to full staff is very important to me. And I'm expressing to you my dedication to work with you on that as well. I guess my last comment is really thinking about the presentations tonight and this conversation about financial stability. And I think it is important. We're going to have to do the hard work to figure out what those trade-offs are that we've been talking about tonight. But I think it's also important to be thinking about not only trade-offs, but if we make an investment in something else, does that help reduce costs elsewhere? And so, a couple of examples that I think of is Dr. Janes talked quite a bit tonight about the impacts of our changing climate on the work that she and her team is doing. And so thinking about what kind of investments we can make now to reduce those costs for her and for our whole city. And so I encourage, as we are doing this work, to try to have that lens, that sustainability lens of what are some investments we can make now. They're going to be long-term cost savings for us in the future under a changing climate, as an example, and investments in energy efficiency, electrifying our fleet. There's lots of things that we could be looking at that are going to help us save money down the road and be financially sustainable. So I encourage us to look at it that way. And then the other example is, the strategies that we think about in addressing the challenges around homelessness. If we make the right investments and do the right strategies, other cities have seen decreases in their costs in cleaning up camps and dealing in the judicial system and the cost to the police department. So we can lower those costs if we make the right investments and do the right strategies. So that's what I'm interested in, is that creative and innovative approach. Yeah, we've got to look at trade-offs, but also consider that if we make investments elsewhere, it may actually reduce our costs, our current costs we're experiencing now. So thanks.
And Councilmember Foray.
Yes, I echo Councilmember Mormon's comments on the environmental themes. For Chief Brady, just on the evidence storage, I'm wondering when the last time we reviewed the policies for how long we have to keep some of those items, and if it's worth revisiting to kind of cut down on some of the items. 71,000 is pretty crazy, so I don't know if we have that.
Yes, we do review that. A lot of that is mandated by the state and the laws surrounding the particular crime.
Okay.
The other difficulty is just dispositions and getting information back from the court, but we do have staff in there that are constantly looking at dispositions, and they like to get rid of things when they can, and so they're constantly looking at that. But thank you.
Thanks. And then lastly, I think Lori and I talked about this as like a fun exercise, that I would be curious if the leadership team were to vote on the different priorities of the different departments, and like they can't vote on their own department, they would have to vote on some of the other departments to see what would you prioritize in funding in all the other departments, so your top 3 in a different department. I would be curious to see if you took your hat off of finance or tech and said, okay, communities or development. So I mean, it's just a fun exercise, because I think we focus so much on our department and what we need and advocating for that if we looked holistically in the city, as department heads that are in it and in the nitty gritty every day, what you think we should prioritize on other parts of the city. Just kind of a fun exercise that if you have some time,
It's a great exercise. All right. All right, with that, I want to thank everyone for their hard work. It's been 2.5 hours, and everyone has stayed with us, so thank you very, very much, especially to the audience members or the public who are with us today. We don't get that very often, so I want to thank all of you. I'm going to call a 10-minute break before we come back to resume for the next workshop. All right. All right. Is everybody resettled? All right. I call us back to order. Mr. Archer, I believe you have the next workshop, and please take it away.
Thank you, Council. The second part of our presentation tonight is to talk a little bit about your budget and fiscal policy. And so we'll jump right into that. A little bit of background. Overall, what this budget and fiscal policy does is it supports your City Council strategic result around financial stewardship. And the last time this was updated was back in 2015, and a lot of things have changed since then, obviously. And so we would like to take this opportunity to work with you to align your policy to current best business practices. Hopefully in your packet, you received a few items. Number one, you received a proposed new policy. Along with that, you should have received what the current policy looks like. We did not redline that because that was assumptive on our part. We wanted to present to you kind of our thoughts, get your feedback, and then come back to you at a later date. So I will quickly run through some of the high-level changes. If you want to follow along section by section, you certainly don't need to. You can just take this information in. Section 1 really talks about the overall strategic plan. And really what we did here is updated some terminology that's outdated, and then really emphasized aligning service levels, principles, and as Councilmember Pfeiffer earlier said, the golden thread, really taking the strategic plan and making it go all the way through to employee performance. In the second section, we updated the language around that alignment and the integration between our strategic results and our city services. You heard a lot about city services earlier, and we're trying to make sure that we align the plan and those services that are being offered. In section 3, this is the area that we made the largest amount of changes, and that is because back in 2015, we were under what we called our focus Arvada, and that was really what we determined a performance-based budgeting. And so we decided that let's remove Focus Arvada, make it performance-based budgeting, which will last forever, or at least as long as City Council likes it. And nobody needs to understand what Focus Arvada means. And so that's what happened in Section 3. We also talked about how the budget's going to be prepared moving forward. So aligning services and the customer experience, again, aligning council strategic results, work system principles, and elements to support those principles, programs that then ultimately define what those level of services mean. And then we added this, that whenever we know that there are future challenges or opportunities, that we want to make sure council is aware of those as well. And finally, this is the link of how the how the resources are being allocated to the services that are being provided and the customer experience. Section 4 has very minimal changes, but I do want to offer one that is unique to this. You certainly do not need to accept this, but this is something that we thought we had heard over time that council might want to be a little more directive to the city manager. And so we put in a section called budget directives. And there's only one in there right now. This was presented by City Manager Gillis during her budget letter this fall, and this deals with streets infrastructure funding. I think earlier we talked that this has been an issue for a while. We had the Public Works Director identify a $20 million need. We're currently sitting at $13 million. This gives a way to continually close that gap, and this directive would be in your policy, so it's something we would have to do every year. You will notice that we did not include any other directives, but you heard a lot tonight about areas of need. And so we would look to you to see if there's any other items that you would like to include. If there's infrastructure, parks, homelessness, sustainability, housing, et cetera, those could be items that you could put under here as budget directives. The challenge to that is you got to be careful what you do because it could lock us in. So ultimately, as you go through your retreat and as we work on finalizing this, please think about what might fit here and if you even like the one that's there. You may not even like this philosophy and we can remove it. The next section is around our 10-year financial plans. We would like to keep these, but there was some cleanup here. The Arvada Center and the hospitality funds no longer exist, so we'd like to remove those. Solid waste was never added, even though that is a new operation of the city, and so we would like to add that in, and we would look for it to be the same as some of our other enterprise funds at a 25% level. And we can dive in more on why we want that, but that is what is in this section. Section 6 is about our 10-year CIP. Again, some small language updates. We also heard from council that updating CIP every other year does not make sense, and so we moved that to an update of every year. This is a practice we've actually been doing for a while. We just wanted to reflect it. And Section 7 is actually a combination of 8 and 9. Councilmember Pfeiffer, I think there's a joke in there. 7, 8, 9. Okay.
I'm funnier than you are, though.
Ultimately, this was all around timing of how the annual report is to be presented to City Council, how City Council is going to, or how staff is going to review and present to you our strategic results. And certainly it didn't make sense to have this in 3 different sections, and so we looked to push them all into one. And then the last section is really about our definitions. Before, the definitions were in the front, and we just thought we should move them to the back. And again, we added budget directives and what that means. If there's other definitions council would like to include, we're certainly happy to do that. We tried to capture all the major points. So again, next steps, get your input tonight, get your input as we move forward, and then once you feel comfortable, we'd like to bring this back to you through a resolution to update. This is our directing document on how we prepare our budget and then recap our strategic results. So we would like to get this done sooner than later, but ultimately this isn't something that has to be done next month. Not bad.
All right, if I'd known it was going to be a 5-minute presentation, I probably wouldn't have called the break.
It's okay.
All right, I'll open it for council member questions and comments. Councilmember Marriott, you are first.
Yeah, Brian, I have a question. There within here is a chart of fund balances, minimum fund balance levels. And I know there's more to that than just taking a wild guess or because we always do it that way or whatnot. Can you provide us with a little bit more explanation of why we pick certain levels for fund balances?
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know if you want me to take every one of them individually, but I'm happy to talk to a couple of them.
Or as groups, or a couple of them as groups,
Sure.
whatever.
Okay, so the general fund at 17% is really best business practice. GFOA requires 2 months of operating, and if you take 2 months, that comes out to 16 point whatever, and so we rounded up to 17%. So that's where that one came from. On the special revenue funds, at 11%, basically where that came from years and years and years ago was a 3% Tabor reserve plus an 8% operating reserve. Those 3 funds also have very dedicated funding sources. So in parks, it's a transfer from the general fund and then funding from open space. And then in the tax increment funds, it's really revenue from sales tax. And so they're less fluctuating. They also sit under the support of the general fund. So it's kind of an additive. And if you look at other organizations, they don't even put a reserve on those funds. Okay.
That was actually going to be my question. It seems like with some of these, Parks one, golf is another one, print
Yes,
shop
that is
might
correct.
be another
Yes.
one. Some of these where it's not just that they have an 11% reserve fund, but they have a 17% reserve fund and then an 11% reserve fund. And is there any logic or efficiency to the city not being not holding on to so much cash and realizing the opportunities with using some of that to the purposes that we need?
Yeah, it's a very fair question, and your assumption is correct. I mean, that is a kind of a doubling. You would get to do that one time, though. So if you took it and said, okay, we're going to use the parks fund balance and it's $2 million and we're going to spend it to do a new park, that's it. You don't get it $2 million every year. And so we've kind of held off from doing that. I will also offer, by having these reserves, whenever we go to a rating agency, it looks really good. So the city, I understand your point, Councilmember Marriott. Our job is not to sit on money, it's to collect money and do something for our citizens with it. And this does help us to get through the difficult times.
Last question, I was asking one more question. In my time here, which has only been 10 years, you've been here longer than that, obviously, have you seen us dip into these reserves?
One time.
When was that?
In the early 2000s.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in my time, I haven't seen us even get close, so.
Yeah, and also, which is not in this policy, but in our overall budget and fiscal policy, to dip into the reserves, we need permission from you all. It has to come from the city manager as a formal request, and you have to give us permission to do that.
Okay. Actually, it brought up the thought of one more question, and that's, I know within the operations of the city, we have a number of operations going on at all times, some of which we see it in our carryover ordinances where it's budgeted in one year but doesn't get expended that year, and we carry it forward to do it. But we also have items or projects or whatnot where there are remnants, where we budgeted X amount, we spent 98% of it, we have 2% left, or we spent 70% of it, we spent. And do we, this may be in the policy where we do it, it might be just our general accounting practices, but do we have I'm assuming we have a regular sweeping of those, back into the general fund or the parental fund they came from? How long does that happen, and how much money do we have kind of floating in that stasis of kind of project's complete, there's money left over, it hadn't been returned to where it came from yet? What do we do with that? How much is floating? I think credit card companies are, like, we used to call it float.
Yeah. Historically, we used to have a little more. Recently, with inflation and the cost escalations on projects, it's very limited dollars that we have available. Our internal practice is that if there's dollars left over, the fund managers have to write how they're going to use those. It has to go through Ms. Gillis, and she has to approve that before we reallocate it. And so really this past few years, it's been a few dollars left in some parks, and that's it, just because of inflation.
Right, okay. All right, thank you.
And that all being said, if that's something that you all would like to see or be a part of, you certainly can direct us to do that.
Yeah, I guess I'd have to think about that. To me, in running my small business, when I have money left over from a certain project, I don't want to keep it over there. I want it to go back towards the main goal of my organization, not towards that sideline or that project. And so, just as a general reaction, I would react that I would prefer the city operate that way. But I know cities operate different from businesses, so there may be reasons why, somebody who's within that work system or that task gets a crack at it first before it goes away and goes somewhere else. You hear so much about government, waste, because it's, you got to spend your whole budget by the end of the year. You won't get as big a budget next year. You won't get your budget increase or whatever. And I think, anything that kind of, even if it just breaks that impression, whether that's really happening or not, might be a good thing. So maybe there should be something in the policy about, fund remnants, where they go, whether they just go to the general fund or whether they go back to the fund from whence they came, or
and I answered and I apologize, Councilmember, I answered your question around project-based. You're making reference to budget, and so as we come up here in the next couple of months, we'll be bringing that carryover that you discussed, and also our one-time budget. And certainly in that practice, we have brought those to City Council and said, here are the remnants from the whole entire organization's budget, and here are the projects that we couldn't fund, and are any of these ones you still want, and if not, how would you like to put those dollars? And that goes to that budget directive a little bit around additional revenues on the revenue side, but certainly on the expenditure side, that could be an area you could be more directive on, for sure.
I guess that's kind of what I was thinking of, rather than a budgetary side, but from an expenditure side, that we kind of do the same thing, that money annually gets rounded up, or whatever the proper time frame is, and put forward in a possibility. I just worry about, we have big fund balances, very healthy fund balances, in the size or scope of the city. You take all these fund balances, and that's tens of millions of dollars of I don't know, it's probably not $100 million, but tens of millions of dollars of fund balances that we have sitting there. So we don't need other remnants kind of not put to use. And I think that's our responsibility to the taxpayers, is to use this money that they send us. We're not an organization that gets to that gets to raise money like a business does. We don't get to have sales and raise revenue or anything like that, nor do we have any responsibility to save money above and beyond what's in our policy. So anyway.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Councilmember Ambrose, you were next.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you a little bit about Section 3, because that seems to be a big change for the fiscal policies, to have it be more on performance-based budgeting. And so I just wanted to verify that the idea behind this is to say there's a strategic objective that council, the city wants to achieve, wants to perform at, and so this is how much money it will cost in order to meet this standard, like roads coming up to a certain percentage level or something like that. My question is more on like the feedback loop. Like I see this is tied to Section 7, where there's like a presentation on whether the money spent achieved the strategic goals. And so I'm just wondering, like what, usually when I see performance, money tied to performance, it is meant in the sense that if the thing we spent money on does not meet the goals, is not successful, then we take the money away. But I don't think that's what we would do as a government level, because sometimes, like the roads, we've spent a lot of money, and actually to be successful, we need to spend way more money. So can you talk about like Section 3 and what we do if things are not successful?
Certainly, and I think another way to think about that would be levels of service versus performance. And so as we're trying to either ratchet up or ratchet down our various levels of service, that's what we would be putting dollars towards. So you use the example of roads, and right now we're meeting a whatever level of service at this amount of money. And if we want that level of service to go up, we're going to have to add more dollars. So that is what this is trying to capture here on the most simplistic level.
Okay, but then the feedback is in Section 7 when the city manager presents like, okay, you appropriated these dollars.
Yes.
This is what happened, and this is what we're advising to be able to meet these strategic goals in terms of further expenditures, right?
Correct.
And then this policy doesn't, I think there's two types of, well, what I'm thinking of, like with government, there's auditing, which is, did you spend the money on what you said you would spend it on, which is one level of fiscal transparency, and we win awards for doing that very, very well. And so I see you're not asking for us to change our auditing policy at all, because we must be doing great at that. But then I think the other part of government misuse or waste is, what is the program successful, and are we spending, is there ways that we could not spend so much money to deliver the same value of services? Are there fiscal policies that look at those aspects of like, what do we do with programs that are no longer needed, no longer successful, and what do we do to make sure that it's financially feasible, it's doing it at a rate compared to other city governments or to other businesses that are doing the same thing? How do we make sure that we are keeping costs low and spending the money successfully?
So part of that will come through the annual report from Ms. Gillis. Part of it comes through what we use for our KPIs or our measures. You saw some of those tonight, where you saw, for example, in infrastructure, they were comparing maybe the number of miles of pipe or, et cetera. In the police department, we were talking about number of officers per 1,000. And so that's where we do those comparatives to other cities. And certainly what dollars we spend goes along with that. It becomes difficult at times because sometimes you get apples to oranges, certainly. And we're always looking to improve, but that's the overall goal here.
So each budget director is kind of tasked with that, of making sure that they're using the money as wisely as possible, but they don't really get an award for reducing expenditures and still providing the same level of services. There's like no mechanisms for that in each department.
It's a fair question. I think we can talk about our budget process if we want to do that.
Yeah, just a couple comments on that. When we go through the strategic planning process, you're going to see that golden thread that takes, from the vision all the way down to what we're going to accomplish. Our budget is tied to those end objectives, so you'll be able to see, here's what we said we do, here's the money that we spent, and here's where we got. So there's that piece. In the budget resourcing plan, council sees very specifically where the money is going and what the money is intended to do. And then the other way in, we may not get an award, but we do a resident survey. And that feedback tells us a lot about where we're at. And then one other piece, each department has various benchmarks that they compare to when we talk about resourcing. And you heard the police chief talk about officers per 1,000 residents. We have those various benchmarks that we need to get better about communicating, because it's all done, and the department heads use it when they're setting up their resources. What we don't do is bring it to you and say, here's where we're at relative to everybody else. And that's part of the new strategic planning process and then performance-based budgeting.
Okay, thank you both.
Councilmember Foray.
Yes, the budget directive that you have on here, it's specific to 50% of all excess revenues appropriated to street infrastructure. I would like to see if there's interest in expanding that to broaden to transportation infrastructure, just so we don't limit ourselves only to streets, but allows for multimodal spending, given just the changing community behaviors and some of our already existing transportation alternatives. So that's more kind of towards the council to see if this is the only directive that's been suggested, 50% going to just street infrastructure, broadening it out so it gives the team a little more right and left lateral movement to spend it how they see appropriate in terms of multimodal use.
Thank you. Councilmember Pfeiffer.
So, and I'm not sure how this is possible. Maybe you can educate me on it around inflation and salary increases and stuff. I know we always go through the process of, well, here's the budget and here's what we're going to pay for. But I almost feel like we should almost embed in our policy that there is inflation built into the budget, priority first before coming to us saying, hey, we're projecting more revenues. Hopefully I'm making sense of what I'm saying. Hey, we're making more revenue. What do you want to do with it? I'd rather almost say you need to take the inflation off the projected additional revenues first and then present the dollars to us. And maybe you do that. I don't know. But it seems like in government, at least the finances I've been around, the inflationary costs are always secondary. So you have the same amount of money, but you're doing less because the inflation just eroded out of your budget. I would like to try to change that thought here where if inflation goes up, it's not lower level of service. Does that make sense? Because that's what will happen. It just erodes away from the LOS.
Yeah, that's a fair, with our 10-year financial plan, we try to build a lot of that in. But when you get caught in a cycle like we're in right now, there's no way we're building in 10, 15, 20% inflation. So that certainly has eroded. And you heard tonight a lot of the departments talking about that they need additional resources to just deliver the services that they were delivering 2, 3, 4 years ago. And so
do you think we could put it in a policy or the process that we first look at what the inflation is out of the forecasted revenues or one-time funds first to cover those before we does that make sense?
Councilmember Pfeiffer, it does make sense, but I think it erodes some of the discipline that we have when we are preparing our 10-year models and putting those assumptions in, because we are forced to look at choices. We do in the 10-year models. Brian and his team build in those inflationary factors, not on every single line, but they also have great discipline with all of our leaders. They come back to us and have us push on areas where we can cover and consider service levels and other changes besides just inflation, because there's other things besides inflation, and to have those detailed discussions is a very good discipline. And we don't bring forth to council saying we have all this money available in our revenues. It's all part of the full model.
It's part of the 10-year plan. He might project
Yeah.
$10 million of additional revenues over 10 years.
Yeah.
But I think, and I hear what you're saying. I still think that's something that council needs to decide on a little bit more, because we should be controlling some of the knobs around the budget of, we don't want the level of service to go down. So therefore we need to be more thoughtful in our conversation around money, that we will need to increase that budget. I don't know if we have that opportunity through the process we have to say, this area is impacted by the 20% inflation. I want to direct you to put more money. We could do that, but I don't think we ever have. We usually kind of go with the budget you're proposing, but we should control some of those dials a little bit, don't you think?
I think you do. I can remember a council member, I won't name any names, that was asking about our revenue assumptions and our revenue increases and construction inflation.
Is that John? That's John. Sounds like something John would say.
Actually,
Yeah.
well, I'm getting myself
But-
in trouble.
No, no,
But
you're
no,
fine.
you asked good questions from your experience and your background related to CDOT. You talked about the inflationary costs related to roads, and you asked questions about that. I would consider that controlling some of the dials. Same with our revenue assumptions related to sales tax, asking questions about what categories of sales tax revenue are going up and down and what our assumptions are. So I do believe there's council discussion related to those dials as they come together. And if we go into the budget policy with detailed things with only inflation but not revenues or other impacts, we will have some challenges. So if we go into too much detail in here, we're going to lose flexibility, and it's going to be council that's going to lose that flexibility.
Yeah, I just want to be thoughtful because I'll tell you, hey, why are we having sewer issues or water issues or road issues, and then we should be adjusting to not have that pressure on staff because the inflationary influences on the project just killed the project. So we're doing, more money, less outcome. And that's not fair for us up on council to sit here and say, well, why didn't those things get done, that we expected? But it's because the inflationary side kicked in and we weren't able to adjust.
I appreciate your comments.
We
and
hold you accountable for it. And then
if we can take it back to make sure we're being responsive to what you're suggesting,
Yeah.
because there may be other ways to address it.
Yeah.
Okay.
We don't need to solve it here if I went down a rabbit hole. But I want to be thoughtful around it because I see projects get ruined. Like, hey, we want to mill and overlay, 100 miles of residential roads, but then it comes back in with the 20% increase, we're only doing 80 miles. And meanwhile, I'm back here talking to our constituents about, we're doing 100 miles. And then we come back and find out, no, we didn't. Then we look like crap because we didn't know and we didn't get to adjust the dials to deal with that, if that makes sense. Maybe that's a better example. The other thing is, I can't read my writing now. Oh, the one-time funds. I want to catch you before because you brought it up. I know it's not dealing with this, but when you bring the one-time funds, and I'm looking at Lori too, usually you all bring us the one-time asks along with that. I'm sure there's some that are not on that list that didn't fit into the dollar exactly. Is there an opportunity in the next round that we can see, not the entire list, but maybe the next 5 that were not funded? Because one thing I think we lose in that conversation is there's still a list of things not getting done, that you've only sent to us the top priorities that fit within the one-time funds, and that is it. And I appreciate leadership scrubbing it and getting it down to that, but I also think council needs to be aware of the things that didn't get funded that were warranted enough to be in the top 10 items or top 20 items or whatever. That gives us at least an awareness of what the departments are asking for that unfortunately did not get funded. That'd be kind of a new thing to add to your list.
Absolutely.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
That's all I have.
Internally, we carry that list forward every year, either until it gets funded or it drops off as a priority, but you're right, we've never brought that to you all.
And maybe we can join in on that list being re-forwarded and how long it's been on there or something, because maybe it can direct us differently with funding and money. I don't know, but that's all I have. Thanks.
All right. Any additional council comments? Seeing none, I
Thank
will
you.
close the workshop. Thank you so much, Mr. Archer. We appreciate you and all your team's work. All right. I will now open the portion of the hearing for second public comment, but there is no one in chambers. Ms. Rush, do we have no one on Zoom either? See, we scared them off, guys. We had people stay and we scared them off. All right. Ms. Gillis, do you have any more reports?
No, just thank you for your time tonight. I know it was long. We'll try and keep them short in the future.
No worries. And you're right, council reports. Thank you, Mr. Pfeiffer. I realized it as soon as it was out of my mouth. So council reports as well. All right, perfect. Seeing none, Ms. Morris.
Nothing from me, Your Honor.
All right, and with that, we are adjourned.